All right, good evening, everybody. I guess our folks are not going to be on time, so we'll go ahead and proceed. We have a quorum. Welcome to the Board of Justice meeting this Monday, August the 23rd. As authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. The City of Rowlett's Board of Adjustment reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or call executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. At this point in time, we'll call the meeting to order. Our first item, of course, is citizens' input. To provide input for the meeting, if you are not attending in person, please send an email to citizeninput@rowlett.com by 3:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. Please specifically state whether your comment is regarding a specific agenda item or a general comment to the board. Your comment will be read into the record during the meeting, and it must be within the 3-minute time limit. For in-person comments, registration forms, instructions are available inside the door of the City Council chambers located in the back. Give me just 1 second. All right. Under item 3, consider approval of the minutes of the Board of Adjustment meeting on March 25th, 2021, and the joint work session with the City Council on April 20th of 2021. Those, of course, were in your packets. Gentlemen, did you have a chance to look at it? Did you have any adjustments, changes?
Make a motion.
You didn't move.
Make a motion.
No, Courtney. No, you got it.
Make a motion to approve minutes.
I have a motion by Mr. Mosley and second by Mr. Schmitz. We'll take a vote. All in favor? And the motion carried. Just 1 second. Yeah. My apologies. All right, moving on to our next item, section 4A, is to conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by Mitchell Liedemond, I hope I got that right, for the variance to section 77-402.A.3D of the Rowlett Development Code to reduce the required street frontage from 35 feet to 25 feet for a flag lot on property zone single-family residential SF40 district. The subject property is located at 6817 Cheezer Road, approximately 1400 northwest of the intersection of Cheezer and Dandridge Roads in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. What's up, man?
How's it going, Chuck? Commissioner, board members, rather.
Members.
Thank you for your time today. As you just read to everybody else, we are here to discuss 6817 Cheezer. And there it is, 6817 Cheezer. And we're here to look at a variance request, requesting a reduction of street frontage from 35 feet to 25 feet for a flag lot and properties on single family SF40. You can see the site location map on the right side of the screen. This is a 3-acre tract of land. It is undeveloped and it is irregularly shaped for the most part. As I stated, there is only 25 feet of frontage along Cheezer, and this is caused by this type of lot is considered a flag lot, which I'll go a little more into what that means in the next couple of slides. The property is on plan development district for single-family residential use. The surrounding land uses to the north and the south are SF40 single-family residential. To the west is the floodplain and Lake Ray Hubbard. And to the east, we have, as shown on the screen, some SF10 single-family residential uses. The subject property is an unplatted flag lot, approximately 126,715 square feet in area. As I stated, single-family residential SF40 requires a minimum of 40,000 square feet. The lot dimensions are approximately 170 feet by 865 feet. And that's not including the actual frontage portion, the skinny segment there at the frontage of Cheezer Road. The applicant is proposing to phase development of this property, beginning with establishing agricultural uses on the land as permitted by the SF40 zoning, and then following up with the construction of a single-family home, as illustrated to the right there with their red circle, or red square, sorry. What are flag lots? You'll see this term come up a couple times tonight. A flag lot is essentially a lot in the shape of a flag, in which there is a slender strip of land that connects to the street. Typically, this is simply to allow access for properties that otherwise would be landlocked. This is a condition that happens often in the rural areas, and it really is caused by just subdivision of property without proper zoning codes and things of that sort. And so all this tends to happen before the establishment of our 2007 Rowlett Development Code, and you'll see other conditions in which, or other areas in the city where the form-based code is actually the one that was adopted later. In this case, we have a property that was parceled out before the establishment of the Rowlett Development Code, allowing access to this property, as well as 5 other properties to the south of the subject property. There is an established easement, a 25-foot easement at the beginning that then, once it exits that property, becomes a 24-foot easement, and does connect, as you can see in yellow on the screen, to 5 other properties to the south, 3 of which are developed with single-family homes. Section 77-402 of the Rowlett Development Code states that no residential dwelling shall be erected in a lot that does not abut on at least one street for at least 35 feet. Section 77 says something similar, where each flag lot shall have at least 35 feet of street frontage and at least 35 feet of width for the entire length of the flagpole. Some considerations are for section 211 of the Texas Local Government Code, Board of Adjustment should determine if this request is contrary to the public interest and if due to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardships. The property is subject to historical subdivision boundaries that with current standards keep that property from developing with a single-family home. The property meets all of the development criteria with the single-family SF40 zoning district, and the existing easement serves an additional 5 properties that are otherwise landlocked. 3 of these, as I stated earlier, have already been developed for this single-family dwelling. Graphically shown, the difference is 10 feet of a reduction. If this variance is approved by the board tonight, that street frontage will alleviate hardship caused by the conditions that were established prior to the adoption of the current zoning standards and allow for the property to be platted and developed with the existing zoning requirements in the Rowlett Development Code in the single-family 40 district. Notifications or notices were sent at a 200 and 500 buffer area, the 500 being a courtesy notice, of which we received 1 in opposition within the 200 feet buffer and 2 in opposition and 1 in favor within the 500 feet buffer. Staff's recommendation is for approval of this variance as the existing ingress and egress easement recorded in Dallas County meets all the other requirements of the flag lot under the Rowlett Development Code. Any development of the subject property would comply with development standards and codes applicable at the property to the property at that time. You guys have any questions? The applicant, I believe, is not here currently to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions for the city?
Just want to clarify, this property was set up before the present requirement for the 35 square foot easement. Is that correct? This property was purchased? Or can you go over the history of which was first, the zoning or the shape of this property?
Certainly. The shape of this property, to answer it straight, does precede the Rowlett Development Code, though the purchase did happen recently. But the shape was...
The lot was set up prior to, when was this zoning first changed to 35 feet? 2007, is that what you said?
2007 is when the current
Development Code?
The Rowlett Development Code was established, and the 2006. But the shape of the lot was there in existence at that time.
Thank you.
Can you clarify, that per state law, all property is required to have an easement to get to a public road, correct?
All properties need access. The properties that are landlocked in this specific do require that easement, and it is an easement that it is recorded with Dallas County, and so nothing that isn't in question tonight. That easement will continue to be there as access to the established properties. That being said, the subject property does have actual frontage, which does encompass that easement.
Thank you. So the property predates the 2006 Development Code. That's one thing that we established. I would imagine that at that time, since there wasn't a minimum, that's probably why it was developed at 25 feet. Just interpreting the intent of the development back then. This particular frontage is serving 4 or 5 properties, is that correct?
This specific access is serving 6 properties, 5 of which are not the subject property tonight.
And all of those properties have been using this access point for many years up to this point. So legally, there's a precedent there beyond just the fact that there is a legally established easement in that corridor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the subject lot that we're discussing is undeveloped, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So 4A is a petition to waive the requirement from 35 feet to 25 feet, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that would help, passing that would help the other 5 or 6 lots to maintain their development access, is that correct?
They would continue to have that access, regardless of the outcome tonight. What it does is that it allows the subject property to plat, and therefore allow them to develop.
So they are planning as a part of this process,
As part of
just
this
have that variance if it's
They would
passed?
follow up with the plat, if granted the variance.
Do you know if that 25 foot is going to have how wide is that roadway or access way, driveway going to be, do you know?
Currently, the access drive is 12 feet in width, and so there is enough of a buffer on either side. That said, once development does occur, there is the possibility of upgrading that access to the property, to the new property. But typically, our standards are for 12 feet access.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Is there anyone here from the applicants like to come forward? No way from the applicants?
Oh, am I supposed to?
Lee, are you the applicant? We do have 4 comment cards that have been submitted, and so if there's no one from the applicants, we will open this as a public hearing because this is required. So at this point in time, I would call up Teresa Hennig Hoffman. Is that correct? If you would speak your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Teresa Hennig Hoffman. I co-own 6829 Cheeser Road, which is part of this easement, is part of this property. So I actually have pictures of the road where he wants to have the easement widened. This property, all of it that is part of this easement was all my great-grandmother and great-grandfather's property. So this easement has been in effect since I was born in 1969, and that's when my parents bought this property. So we are opposed to the easement. There are 3 parcels of land that are all addressed as 6817 Cheesa, which is what they want, 3 acres, but there's 3 different parcels. So we're worried that if 6817 gets a variance for the 25 feet, who's to say that all the way down will not be, that the variance will be for the whole easement. And we do not want the easement. I speak for 3 of the property, 6829, 6825, and 68, I'm not sure what my cousin's property is. But we also, I pulled the city ordinance for section 77-402, and D says, X actually says projections and just required setbacks. It says dwellings must on Front Street exceptions. No residential dwelling shall be erected on a lot that does not abut on at least one street at least 50 feet in width at the building line for at least 35 feet. An exception to this provision exists where a paved mutual access easement of at least 35 feet in width is provided and recorded for record. we have a problem because if the easement is paved, if y'all allow the variance and they have to pave part of our easement, who's gonna maintain that? I mean, if they're gonna develop this property, they're gonna build a house, they're probably gonna flip it, who's gonna maintain this paved part of our easement? And we're wondering, why now? Why in 52 years has someone now wanted a variance for this easement? So, that's where we stand.
All right. Thank you.
Do you want the pictures to see the actual road that they want the variance for? It's very narrow,
Don't use it.
and there's trees there that will have to be knocked down.
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your
All right,
time.
thank you so very much. Next up is Mary Stout. We can please give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Mary Scott, and I live at 6825 Chooser Road. Actually, this property is not on Chooser Road, it's behind Chooser Road. We actually have a 24-foot easement. It is lifetime, it is filed in Dallas County, it's in my deeds, and it's also in all my surveys. There's no city services down there. The water lines are not the best, and I wish that you would consider not approving it. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you so much. All right, this being the case, we'll close the public hearing. I would be compelled to ask the city if you want to respond to the one as far as that ongoing 35-25. I'm not familiar with the component going on down. It's not going to have any impact, right? This is only about this one request. But there's a concern going down further, but there's...
Correct, it doesn't impact the existing easement. In regards to maintenance, it's always the property owner's responsibility to maintain easements within their properties.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. At this point in time, board have any questions I want to kick around? Or?
I just want to confirm that the staff's position is to recommend approval.
That is correct.
Speaker, I'd like to make a motion. If you're ready for a motion?
Yes, there's no more questions, yes. Oh,
I have no more questions,
All
so
right, perfect. Now I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance to section 77402A3 of the Rowlett Development Code for this applicant.
Motion, do I have a second? Somewhere, one place, you know? And the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to our second one, second agenda item, 4B, to conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by Cody Frank, I hope I got that right as well, for a variance to section 77.903.a to allow for the construction of an additional structure not conforming to the requirements of the Rowlett Development Code on a property with a non-conforming use on property zone form-based commercial center FB-CC district. The subject property is located at 8620 Merritt Road, approximately 1,490 feet west of the intersection of Cheeser Road and Hickox Road in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas.
Hi. Chairman, board members, thank you for your time again. And as you stated, we are here to discuss the accessory structure located along Merritt Road. It is just southeast of Hickox intersection. And it is a request to allow this 2,250 square foot accessory structure on the land. The property is zoned form-based commercial center district, which is a zoning district that was enacted or adopted by City Council back in 2014, following the adoption of the form-based code in 2012. The subject property is a 3-acre tract and is currently developed with a 2,300 square foot single-family residence with a covered footprint of approximately 3,500 square feet. By covered footprint, I'm including the garage and covered porches. Access to the site is from Merritt Road along a variable width access easement approximately 45 feet wide. This is also a flag lot, and it also has an easement that runs the length of the property, and it allows for a property to the rear to have access. Though this easement itself and the access to Merritt Road is 45 feet wide, therefore it does meet the requirement for frontage. The property is zoned, as I stated, commercial center, and the surrounding land use is rural in nature, but it is also zoned commercial center. The subject property is an unplatted 3-acre flag lot, and it measures 213 feet in width and approximately 751 feet in depth. The applicant has begun construction of this structure, and they did request for a building permit back in 2020, which was denied and deferred back to Planning and Urban Design Division. The proposed metal structure is 45 feet, or approximately 45 feet by 50 feet, with a height of approximately 20 feet, a height that does not exceed the height of the peak of the roof of the residence. That statement is there essentially to say the height is okay in regards to the standards of the code. An easement runs the full length of the property, which does allow that rear property access. The form-based, as I stated earlier, this is in a form-based commercial center district, rezoned back in 2014 as part of the North Shore rezoning. North Shore, as you may be aware, is encompassed of several different districts. This portion of it being majorly commercial center and intended to bring about the development of that employment center vision for the city of Rowlett. Some of the characteristics are, mixed-use buildings, commercial and flex employment building types, proximity to parks and urban plazas, and integrated with a tight network of streets with consistent block length. So we're looking at a significant change in the urban scope of this area in the near to long-term future. The future land use plan found in 2019 further reinforces the vision of this area as a future mixed-use commercial area through the designation of the employment center. The development pattern is intended to be characterized like higher density commercial blocks with supporting multifamily residential uses. Some considerations are Section 7793 of the Rowlett Development Code, and I paraphrase, states that an existing building at the time of rezoning can be expanded, but a new non-conforming structure outside the bounds of that building is not permitted. Though the structure appears to meet all typical criteria of a carport in an allowed residential district, approval of this request would expand the structural non-conformity of the property by adding another building to a non-conforming use, contrary to the intention of bringing properties into conformance with the regulations on uses and development standards of the form-based code commercial center district. If visibility is a concern, the applicant has stated that they're willing to upgrade landscaping and screening mechanisms. This is what the property currently looks like. As I stated, they construction had begun before it was asked to stop and follow this process. And so, but you get a good idea of what this structure would look or feel within the land with a engineered sketch up on the top right. Notices were sent at a 200 and 500 foot radius, of which we received 3 in favor within the 200 feet notice area, and 1 in favor within the 500 foot courtesy notice area. Our recommendation is denial of the variance to allow for the construction of this 2250 square feet accessory building, as the property is zone commercial center and explicitly allows for the continuance, well, and explicitly envisions a mixed-use commercial area with different development standards. No physical hardship has been demonstrated, and approval of this variance would set a precedent that may prolong the development of the North Shore as envisioned. Though the form-based code does state that and sets it states that continuance of legally non-conforming uses can occur. This is a new structure independent of that protection, and therefore it is a illegally, in a sense, non-conforming structure not protected by the form-based code. The applicant is here to answer any questions, as I am myself to answer any questions you may have.
Board, any questions for staff? No?
I do have a couple of questions. So this existing lot has a home
Correct.
on it, and it's currently occupied?
It is.
Am I clear in reading the plans that this actually is a property that encompasses multiple homes?
This property itself only has one home. It does have an access easement that allows access to a home behind this property that is otherwise landlocked.
Okay, and also can you clarify something for me in the development code? It notes that they're able to expand the property, but not outside the existing boundary. How do you expand and not go outside an existing boundary?
That is correct. So in essence, what the code is stating there is that an existing structure, say their home, they're allowed to expand that specific structure. Now, when they decide to do a new structure outside of the bounds of that specific building, a new structure in a sense that is disconnected from the existing structure, that is a non-conforming structure that is not permitted at the time of the rezoning.
Carlos, I just want to understand from your presentation about the building permit that was denied. Can you that was in 2020, is that right?
Correct. That was mid last year. They submitted a building permit to the Building Safety Division. It was denied as it didn't yet meet the requirements of the zoning.
All right.
And the plan.
And the applicant has a presentation to make after you, because I'm curious if it was denied. I want to know when the construction actually started, so maybe the applicant can tell me that when they come up to it.
Yes, they don't have a presentation, but they are here.
No, I'll ask them directly if they don't have a presentation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is that back yet? Carlos?
Second.
Sorry. So, tell me if you would, a couple things. One, explain, I'm reasonably up to speed on North Shore. Tell me how this would possibly prolong. I mean, obviously it's a wide, vast area out there being considered under the particular pieces of what it's intended to be. But there are a handful of residential places out there. How do you see this prolonging? That's the word you used in your presentation.
That is correct. So essentially, I also use the word precedent. And what this does is establish precedent that current properties can now continue to develop their land. What this does is, in a sense, make it harder for potential developers to to negotiate on property values. It also establishes new, in this case, rural residential components that are detracting from the existing vision. So if, as a developer, if you're coming in and you see that this is a thriving rural neighborhood that is continuing to grow and develop, you're less likely to want to develop here, or you're going to go for somewhere else that is easier to develop, perhaps cheaper, and one all would like to go into see.
Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate the question because when we talk about prolonging a use, this goes back to or stems to the creation of a zoning ordinance. In this instance, the property originally was established under previous parameters. Absolutely understand that. And so as cities or communities evolve and as land use patterns evolve and as comprehensive plans evolve, the future land use plan then starts forecasting future developability. And through that, your zoning code is revitalized to include or incorporate those elements. So what happens is, in this instance, if you notice, the zoning on this property is commercial center, form-based code commercial center. However, the past use, even in the surrounding built environment, has not been that. So the vision has always been that through amortization and through the life of a project or a development, it will evolve into those uses. And that's why this residential structure is a legally non-conforming use. And so to add a use which isn't even permitted under the zoning district then expands or extends the life or the longevity of the use, which then makes it harder for redevelopment to occur under current zoning ordinance parameters. That's why this request is before you, Board of Adjustment, to determine if you deem that the legally non-conforming use or the additional use can be added. And we are presenting to you what the amortization aspects could be related to this property.
Okay, that makes, I mean, I completely understand the concept of it. Right. Go ahead.
So a couple of follow-up questions pertaining to the North Shore development of this area. Are there any current or ongoing negotiations for any kind of development in this particular neighborhood in close proximity to this property that the city or the owner is aware of?
That the owner is aware of? I'm not sure if the owner is. I don't know if staff has received any
Well, I imagine the owner will get up and speak. Okay, if you could answer that question when you have a chance to speak, please. If the assumption at this point is that there's no planned proposed commercial developments in that area, it seems that the property owner would have the right, as the property owner, to negotiate at the time that a proposal is placed for commercial development to him, that he could negotiate whatever is in a mutually advantageous situation. We have to be careful not to preclude the current owner who has been out there, or that this land use has been out there. The difference here is we have two conflicting situations. There's the land use, which is the current land use, which is residential, which is, it is what it is, and it has been for quite a long time. And we have to respect that as planners and as developers. But clearly, we have to keep an open mind as to the future developability of this entire area. So we're just kind of caught in a balance between maximizing the land use that the current owner has paid for and has the rights to as a private property owner, and the future vision of what the city would like to see. But we're not necessarily mandating that. So we have to be careful about where we strike the balance. So I just wanted to,
I think that's a wonderful way to phrase that. I think that's very well articulated. Again, the planning team that's before you, that's presented this item, has to follow the strict code that's stipulated, that was established by, our council, and we have a zoning ordinance. We also have a comprehensive plan, fully understanding that. We also know many properties are legally non-conforming. We're not saying that the uses are illegal, but they're legally non-conforming. And so that's why there's a board of adjustment that's established then to handle these types of situations.
I think the operative word there that's very important for the public to understand is that it's legally non-conforming. Just because it's non-conforming doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it. It means that at the time that the land use was initially established, it did not necessarily meet the vision of what the future comprehensive land use plan was proposed to be. And of course, when that land was originally developed, I'm guessing at least 40 or 50 years back, the North Shore wasn't even a concept to be thought of. So again, the point is that we have to strike a balance.
I would also ask the comment about the applicant looks like he used the term grandfather. I mean, I don't know how long ago, I'm not sure the rules with North Shore today and the change in code you guys made in the city, but the term grandfather typically means, if you think about when you came down 190 and all of the signs went up when the person came in there, if they went up by a certain day, then they were grandfathered in so that they could go ahead and put them all up. So I think about the term grandfather and the significance of that. So I asked the connect point here, is there really a relevant point that meets his comment of being actually, grandfathered? So
the current use absolutely is grandfathered, but any residential uses such as this accessory structure is just not permitted in the current zoning of the property. And that's the balance that you're referring to, and that's the balance that we're referring to. So yes, definitely some difficult decisions.
Clarification, if this addition was physically attached to the house, would it be allowed as a conforming adjustment?
Right, so it would be an expansion of the existing structure, because it's no longer an accessory use. It's not independent.
Could you please repeat that?
If the proposed structure that's currently under construction was attached to the primary structure, then it would be an expansion of the existing footprint and not be considered a new building. So if that avenue is available to the applicant through some form of a breezeway, I don't know, then that's an option too. So that's, again, something that you can pose to the applicant tonight.
okay, I guess we'll get to that moment real quick. So any more questions for staff? All right, thank you. The applicant is here. Of course, we'd love to have him come up and say a few words. If you would please, of course, give us your name and address. Thank you.
Chris Williams, my wife Kaylee Williams. Just to start, this land's been in our family for almost a century now. The land behind me is my parents'. The flagship lot that they're talking about, we own the land in front of us as well. It's just a different lot. That's a commercial property. What we bought was my grandmother's house. It is actually, it's a sentimental type deal, so that's why we moved out there. We wanted the land, we wanted our kids to grow up where we grew up at. We have a lot of toys, four-wheelers, motorcycles. That's the only reason why we're building this thing. We're trying to put our tractor, four-wheeler, motorcycle. We have a fifth-wheel trailer that we're keeping somewhere else, but whenever we do bring it out, we don't want it to be an eyesore like our neighbors has been, where don't want to say the city, but the city's allowed campers, maybe 15 campers at one time next door, no COs on them. So there was theft at our house. I've got my uncle on one side, my parents on the other, and a cousin catty corner. So it's all perfectly family land. The land that they're referring to be sold is McEntee's. That's family to us. No, there's no contract for it to be bought yet. I've heard about this being purchased since 97. I mean, what are we doing? You want me to attach the building to the house and then it's okay? That's just silly to me.
Well, we'll gladly plow it down too, like once, if this property is.
We're trying to stay there as long as we can possibly stay there. That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to enjoy it while we can. When that land gets purchased, whenever that may be, they're probably gonna purchase us and our family as well. It's 20 acres with our family now, it used to be hundreds of acres. It's dwindled down, and when the time comes, we will sell. We're not trying to make money off the building, we're just trying to protect the items that we currently own. So,
I don't know exactly what you received, but we have a letter of intent. I don't know if I'll read it. So we were grandfathered in on this property when we purchased it from Chris's grandmother after she passed away. She left her estate to 3 children, 2 of which are our current neighbors on adjacent land, all of which have approved this building, by the way, who have similar structures, very similar structures on the land. And we would like to add a detached garage on our land. There are several neighboring and surrounding properties with similar structures, and all of our neighbors approve. There will not be a negative impact to the land or the neighbors. The only thing that will be affected are the aesthetics of the property, improving it greatly. Our home size and garage is too small, and the ceilings are too low for the equipment necessary for managing the land and recreational vehicles we have. Tractor, riding lawnmower, 5th-wheel camper, UTV, 4-wheeler, motorcycle. And the detached garage would be a very nice structure and would tidy up this equipment while simultaneously increasing curb appeal. We realize we'll eventually have to sell our property, but while we own it and are here, we would like to be able to enjoy it and utilize it and feel like our belongings are secure. There have been upwards of 5 couples and, like he said, about 15 campers and separate campers next door that's not the family owned, but they do approve also, that have been allowed in the backyard, living there, directly adjacent to our property, and we share a property line over the last year. That's when it was sold. Several occurrences of police reinforcements coming to their property, gunshots, helicopter surveillance, and arrests have happened in this last year. We're not trying to pass judgment, but we would feel much more secure if our belongings were locked up. This is our home, and we would love to not have to worry about what may be missing when we wake up. We truly appreciate your consideration and approval. And like I said, when it is time to sell, if it's a matter of this may take longer and prolonging this situation, we'd be happy to tear it down. We've got the equipment.
for the record as well, we never received any denial.
No,
We never received a denial.
I don't know what that's referring to.
We've been in contact, trying to be in contact for months, trying to set this meeting up for,
Since April of 2020.
so.
Staff, can you clarify this thing about this denial of building permit? I mean, I'd like to know what's going on here. They say they didn't get it, you said they were denied, so.
Yeah, and perhaps it was a miscommunication with the building official, but it's essentially all building permits that are applied to expire within a period of time. Perhaps that's what occurred, and it was denied by that process. And so,
So there was a permit issued and the time expired to when they started to construct? Because I noticed on the photographs that, you started construction on it.
correct.
I mean, what I want to know is, did they start building this structure after it was denied?
I do not know the timing of when it was started construction.
Maybe they can tell us, when did you start construction on it?
We started construction before the denial.
Well, I mean, I want to know for sure from staff what the timeline is here.
And I'll even begin to tell you, we paid permits, and months later, we still couldn't get a date set, and then it came to the point where we had to resubmit, and then we got a refund for the initial, and
That's the only thing that was not denied. That was just, we
Well,
were told.
it was never denied. We had to file for a different permit.
Yes, and you know that. You know which one office.
Okay, staff, I think we have a staff member who's gonna help clarify this. I'd like staff to jump in here and,
We have numerous emails as well.
Well, it was originally under the special use permit, and that's when we were told it needed to be changed to this Board of Adjustments. That's the only thing we've ever been told needed to be different.
okay. Stand by, folks, because I want to hear what.
Sure.
So my name is Dale Jackson, I'm the chief building official for the city. My understanding is that the construction started before a permit was applied for. They did apply for a permit, that permit was not approved. They were sent to planning because the permit exceeded 500 square feet, or the building exceeded 500 square feet. And it required a special use permit in order for a permit to be issued for anything over 500 square feet requires a special use permit for an accessory building. So the answer to your question is you're not authorized to build a building or start construction on a building until a permit has been issued. So they were not issued a permit. Construction began before they even applied for the permit. And once that was determined, then it was stopped. And then we told them, you can't have a permit without a special use permit. And then my understanding is that
Thanks, sir.
that's right.
Applicant is,
Partially, yes. So we called, tried to make permits. It was during the COVID time. We did everything we could to get the permits rolling, couldn't get feedback. So yes, I was ready to protect my utilities that I had on my property after a few items came up missing. So yes, I started construction.
thank you, appreciate it.
Any more questions for the applicant? How far is that building from your house? Just so I can cover all the angles there.
It's on the drawings. My stomach kind of hurts not seeing all the details I put into all this, but I feel like it's 21 feet from the driveway. We would gladly connect it in some way, but that seems a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I'll do whatever we need to.
I mean, it's kind of contradicting if it's an eyesore, for whatever reason you don't want me to build it, but yet I can attach it to the house.
It'd just be more to tear down.
Yeah. So, I'll be happy to comply with whatever you guys choose, but just hope y'all don't request that as well. I dropped a lot of money into this.
Sounds like you did. The little mixture of COVID and city and timing and patience and. All right, well, before we make any more comments on it, we'll open up the public hearing if you have anything else for us. No? All right, thank you very much. All right, this has been a public hearing. Of course, we'll open up to the public. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on behalf or in either way towards this particular agenda? Come down, sir, please give us your name and your address, please.
Robert Williams, 8616 Merritt Road, Rowlett. I guess I got, one of the questions that sticks with me is, they said that there was one person within 500 feet that denied. Is there a way we can know that, not to intimidate, but we're all family out there, and everybody said, yes, this was fine. So I don't know who that 500-foot person would be. Doesn't really matter, but everybody's family. The other is, and we've been out there since '84, and so many things change, it's just hard to keep up with some of these rules, and like I said, COVID being a problem. But we've also seen, not pointing names or fingers, but we've seen a lot of other structures go up just random over the past year, 2 years, and I've talked to a couple people, and they said, no, we didn't have to get a permit. And I thought, well, okay. They say they grandfathered, they lived there for X amount of years. And they do, not that new additions going in now, that Fayetteville and Bentonville streets, But that Hickok, kind of on the older part of town, going towards 190, I guess it'd be north end. There's just structures been popping up randomly, and I know some of them are 500 feet. But as far as we're concerned, and that's my son's house, I don't see it being an eyesore. I think it actually adds to it. And again, when it comes time to sell, our family's kind of in agreement that when it's time, we're just gonna pack up and go at the same time. So let the developer, whoever it may be, come in and offer us a price, and then we'll work out the bugs on it and let it be. I really don't see where this would be a hindrance in selling. And as far as the neighbor they were talking about, they have cleaned up that issue over there, and they're working real diligently on that to keep it that way. However, there's nobody living there right now, so who's to say? But that's pretty much it. But I don't understand who the 500-foot person was. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak this time?
Do you have to be signed up to speak?
No, ma'am.
Can I just make a comment?
Please come on down, please. If you would, again, give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Azucena Susie Rios. I lived in Rowlett since 1985. Same neighborhood, 8823 Merritt Road. And just Saturday, I had to call 911 because someone was in the backfield with a shotgun shooting while I was out there with my goats. So there has been robberies, theft of items. We had a motorcycle stolen from the backyard too. So it's not the way it used to be. So we used to be able to leave things out and it didn't matter. But it's changing. People are coming and going. We're seeing more homeless people coming around. They're so close to George Bush. Someone can just come in and go right out. And yes, I do see the helicopters. Because I see it when I'm watering. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's time to get in the house, you know? And I turn on. So we have to take care of our either livestock or the things that you have. So I agree that somehow, some way, they've been here a while too, that we do have to protect our things because things are getting stolen. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Is there any other? No? At this point in time, of course, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any questions you guys have? Let's talk about.
I would like to ask staff if there are, I would really like to see some kind of middle ground before voting to approve or deny. It sounds like one option is to figure out a way to attach the dwelling to the current structure. Are there any other options that the owner should consider that staff would be willing to entertain?
Absolutely, we know that in order to continue the legal non-conformity, one way is to attach the structure. Beyond that, the codes are pretty clear on what options are available, and that is to go to the Board of Adjustment. So it's hard for staff to find that middle ground because the code explicitly states what those parameters are. But we understand where the applicant is coming from too.
Just to expand on that, is the reason for your staff's recommendation for denial simply because of the black and white language in the code?
Simply put, no, and I'll elaborate, and I thank you for that question too, because it's always difficult to look at something and say, no, you cannot do it, but the reasons behind it, as I mentioned, the intent of the current zoning district is to start, properties to start evolving into those uses, to build according to the form-based code, to allow those uses that are permitted in the form-based code. But what the code does also say is, well, we also, it wants to have as much flexibility as it can to inject in it. That's why that parameter of if you're expanding the footprint per the form-based code, because we know there are several properties that are what we call in the, neighborhood or single-family type zoning categories, rural neighborhood. So there is that flexibility to allow that. However, to add a new nonconformity or to add a new use that doesn't even classify as a nonconformity is where it becomes difficult for staff. And I absolutely, just to preface on one more item, the applicant absolutely, unfortunately, did get stuck a little bit with, us dealing with the pandemic, trying to figure out meetings and all that. So we do sincerely understand that headache they have to face in terms of timing.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because the public may not know this, but I'm a civil engineer and I run a development company, and I've been caught in that situation where different cities, because of the restraints and requirements of the COVID pandemic, have had to work remotely. And so I respect where the homeowner might be frustrated and where staff may feel that maybe something fell between, through the cracks, and that's why I keep looking for some kind of a middle ground, because I really think that I honestly feel that a homeowner really does have the right to protect his property and to establish the best value for his family and for his property, as long as it's reasonable. I don't see malice or neglect here. I just see an unfortunate set of circumstances through no fault of the city and probably not much fault on the part of the homeowner. So I'm just in a dilemma, to be honest with you, as to which way I should vote on this one.
I will add a couple tidbits of my own. For me, I find it very interesting that North Shore area up there is intended to be from 70 to 400 acres, I believe, encompassing that area that you guys live in. And it sounds like you guys have already accepted the fact that at some point in time, the city is pushing it pretty hard right now, the North Shore area, that they feel pretty confident that at some point in time in the future, they will be hopefully find the right folks to come in there. And it will not be residential, I don't think, but it might be. But the fact that you're already accepting the fact that your intent is to relinquish the property when the time comes, aside of the fact that I'm listening carefully to the more of the concerns of the environment coming into your property and instilling or causing other mischief. And I have no idea what this building's going to cost you. Somebody spent money. Now again, I don't care what it was. It seems a little unfortunate that it would be conceptualized to be torn down, but that would probably end up being the end game there is you build it for whatever length of time, maybe for a week, or which is not the case, or it could be a few years or whatever it takes. I for one, and I know what the city's saying, I follow that pretty closely. For me, I'm a little bit like Mr. Frisbee, I'm a little torn on both sides of this deal, but I'm a long-term resident, mixed on both the past and the future. If the motions are here tonight, I will tell you that I'll be voting in favor of the variance. It just seems like you have a right, in my point, and they're trying to prevent, and I get that, but it's almost like when you try to prevent downtown from its intended development of what it is. And we did get some progress there, but it's taken a very long time. And to withhold that from an applicant who is perfectly conditioned their mind that they will let it all go when the time comes, to me, almost comes in, until the time gets there, and then you might as well protect your stuff. And it's just my own personal opinion, and it would not be that of the complete board. They'll make their own decisions as well, but I tend to find myself torn both ways, because I'm a big Rowlett guy, and I believe in this future, where we're going, and I love the North Shore concepts. But as a landowner, as I am as well, and I can appreciate where you're at. So I'm just going to make that comment out there. Depends on how the motions go, but I would be voting in favor of your variance personally. So that's all I got. Anybody else have anything else? Okay.
Add one comment to that. I'm a little disturbed by the city's response that they're not sticking with the black and white. This is starting to feel like perhaps there's a little bit of concern about making it too easy for these people to stay until they're ready to go. And that is a bit uncomfortable when we understand that there's, as was described, there's an understanding that during the non-conforming life of the property, there's room for betterment for reasons I think we all understand. And I was hoping that we're sticking with the language and we're looking for the board to help here. I think I'm with you on this one.
No other questions? I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance. Do you want the whole language?
No, we'll let you do that part. You made a motion, so thank you. So a motion, do we have a second? Second, Mr. Schmidt. All right. If you cast your votes, please. Okay. The good news is that 3 of the 4 voted yes. The downside for you is, unfortunately, is that in the Board of Adjustments, it requires the 80% majority here, which is 4. If I had a 5th one up here, then we could go that route.
I read that it was 75%. Is that not accurate?
Well, the Board of Adjustments requires 4 votes, if I'm not mistaken. That is the correct consensus, right? Not the majority. It's
Paperwork we received that Carlos sent us, just more communication, that's not great.
stand by a second.
So Chris, if I understand correctly, and this is a protocol here, it doesn't mean that it's been denied, it just means that it hasn't been approved, is that correct?
I think anything other than an approval is considered a denial. So staff will clarify for me, but I apologize for, I've been down this road one time before, and it was a little bit of a confirmation for me.
That is correct. The request, the variance request does not pass, it failed, so it's considered, now the applicant can come back for an alternative request, but you've already cast the vote on it, so.
But the language that you guys sent in the email said 75%.
It has to do with the board is 5 members and there are only 4 present, so.
Did he say why he objected to it?
Even if we did the attach it to our house,
I'm trying to get the protocol in my mind about these variances that we've had in the past, but there's just been a couple of them that the language says one thing, the rules say something else for us as a board.
I think the 5th person should vote.
The downside for us was that fifth person wasn't here on time, so therefore I couldn't see them.
Then why did they count the 100%?
I can
Stand by.
address a couple of those questions. The first thing is the Board of Adjustment, as established by local government code, lays out these parameters, so it's not an ordinance that the city of Rowlett has. We're following the state requirements based on the local government code. What we can do is we'll sit back down with the applicant and figure out another way to see if there are alternatives available where we can determine or talk about options. If it means coming back to Board of Adjustment with an alternative option, we can definitely do that. We'll assess that with the applicant. We will meet with them first thing tomorrow morning, and we will think next steps.
I would concur that's a very good idea. I would really encourage staff to try to figure out a middle ground, whether it's attaching the structure or something.
Right, if
And you may want to confer with the city attorney just to double check.
right, if it complies with our codes and ordinances and there's another option available, then we will visit with them and determine what that is. Absolutely.
Okay, so again, unfortunately, your variance has been denied, and for that I apologize. But I would encourage, I guess, to go back to the city. They're obviously willing to have a discussion about an alternative, because I would encourage you to do that. I think what you're doing out there is the right thing to do until this point in time comes up that they can bring in a North Shore environment. But
We'll see you back in a year. Honestly, that's how long it's taken.
Who do we contact? Because it's been garbage. I work for another city, first of all, and this city to deal with, you guys have been great, but it's been atrocious. No communication, months to respond to emails. The emails that, when I finally do get a response, it's her saying that she's gonna go above them to get a response. And then, oh, the next thing you know, we get a response, and then it's delayed and pushed back for 3 more months.
I don't know if we're trying to keep staff on that. But. All right, guys.
He's just a kid.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 4C. To conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by Beth, I didn't know, was it Juan? I so apologize for where I messed that one up really bad. For a variance to Appendix 2.1 of the Form-Based Code to reestablish a non-conforming residential structure built to zone on property zoned Form-Based Rural Neighborhood FBRN District. The subject property is located at 9114 Merritt Road, being Lot 1, Block A of the Merritt addition, approximately 640 feet northwest of the intersection of Hickox and Merritt Roads in the city of Dallas, Dallas County, Texas. So we'll hear from staff.
Chairman.
Welcome.
Chairman, thank you very much. Board members, thank you for being with us this evening. Waiting for the presentation here. There we go, perfect. As was just read, we're here this evening to consider an item to reestablish a non-conforming residential structure built to zone, otherwise known as a setback, on property zone, form-based rural neighborhood. That's the abbreviation FBRN district. You can see it on the screen there, highlighted in red for you. Some background on this site: the subject property is developed with a single-story residential home that is set back approximately 130 feet from Merritt Road. The home was constructed prior to the adoption of the Form-Based Code. This is within the North Shore North District, slightly different than the previous item. But however, it was again constructed prior to the adoption of the Form-Based Code and therefore is legally non-conforming in its current status and location. The Form-Based Rural Neighborhood District does require a build-to zone from the back of sidewalks to the right-of-way of 25 to 35 feet. Per Article 163B of the Form-Based Code, the Board of Adjustment may reinstate a non-conforming structure, such as this one in its current location, if it is damaged to an extent where the cost of repair to its original condition is greater than 50% of the appraised value. Again, the applicant for this evening is seeking to reconstruct the home in its current location, stating that the structure has in fact been damaged 50% more than its appraised value. Therefore, you have the authority to approve that. Some site data for you: the existing single-family home is serviced by a circular driveway. You can, oh, pardon me. Sorry, I thought I had a pointer. I don't. The existing serviced by a circular driveway that intersects Merritt Road at 2 locations. You can see that slightly on screen there. The existing land use pattern surrounding the property is also rural residential in nature. And I want to preface that the rural neighborhood district does allow for this type of development, just with some different standards that we're prefacing. The lot sizes for these surrounding properties range anywhere from a ½ acre to just over 4 acres. Not atypical of this lot to have the size that it does. Many of the homes along Merritt Road are not uniform in their lot dimensions, their dwelling areas, or setbacks, and most, if not all, were constructed prior to the adoption of the Form-Based Code. Some considerations for you this evening. The applicant has stated that the structure was damaged beyond that 50% threshold by the tornado event of 2015, is therefore requesting that the Board of Adjustment reinstate the non-conforming front setback of 130 feet. The applicant has not provided sufficient documentation to staff's expectation that the structure was damaged beyond 50% of its appraised value. It's worth noting that an engineer's report was submitted outlining the damage. However, it was not signed and sealed by a registered professional engineer, and as so, staff could not use this document to verify the extent of damage. The applicant has also provided construction quotes with line items outlining scope of work, so that includes any sort of improvements on the interior, ranging from demolition costs, kitchen cabinets, labor costs, but does not offer a consensus on the origin of the damage or the reason for these costs. These costs do not suggest any incurred damage, but rather show pricing for the renovation. Per Article 163B of the Form-Based Code, again, the Board of Adjustment shall consider the public welfare and developing character of the surrounding area in your consideration on this item. Of the surrounding 13 single-family homes within 500 feet of the notice along Merritt Road, none have a built-to line of less than 50 feet, it is worth noting. The average front setback in these properties is right on par with this site at around 132, approximately average. The required built-to zone of 25 to 35 feet would result in a much smaller front setback than the surrounding properties. However, it is the intent of the Form-Based Code to bring properties into compliance as they redevelop. The requested reinstatement of this non-conforming setback would not necessarily have a negative visual or physical impact on surrounding properties, but would not fulfill the intent of the Form-Based Code to support, as it says, successional urbanism through redevelopment, as well as amortizing non-conforming locations. Some more considerations for you. Section 211 of the Texas Local Government Code states that the Board of Adjustment should determine if this request is contrary to public interest, and if due to special considerations or conditions, a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in a hardship. The property is not subject to any special conditions that would warrant hardship by complying with the required 25 to 35 foot built-to zone. It is a principle of the Form-Based Code to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, as it is with all of our codes and ordinances, and therefore compliance with the actual code standard in that code would not jeopardize the public interest, as that is a guiding principle. The Form-Based Code was adopted for this area in 2014, this being the North Shore North regulating area. And in order to implement codes in a retroactive manner, we must do so by amortizing the non-conforming uses and structures through the redevelopment process, such as this. This is a public notice item. We sent out 18 200-foot notices and 23 courtesy 500-foot notices earlier this month on August 6th. We have received 4 in favor from the 200-foot area and 1 in favor from the 500-foot area. With that being said, staff's recommendation is denial of the request to reestablish a non-conforming residential structure built-to zone or setback. In order to implement the Form-Based Code, again, we must do so by amortizing non-conforming uses and structures through redevelopment such as this request. The applicant has not supplied documentation to staff that the structure was damaged beyond 50% of the appraised value. which is required for your consideration. And should the Board of Adjustment seek to approve this request, it is recommended that the applicant supply that adequate documentation to you this evening through this public hearing item. And again, just a reminder from the last item, an affirmative vote of 75% is required for the board to decide in favor of this item. With that, I'm available for any questions. The applicant does actually have a short presentation for you, so you're welcome to call them up on the recording.
Stand by a second. Board, you have questions?
This is more of a thing for the chairman and the staff. I've seen it before, and I appreciate it when you have the circles with the 200 and the 500 feet,
Yes, sir.
and you have opposition. I would certainly appreciate on those lines delineated where these people are that are opposing these things, because if it's a next door neighbor by somebody 500 feet away, that carries a lot more weight.
Yes, sir.
I mean, when we have difficult decisions to make up here, whether to support what you're presenting or to support the applicant, we need to know specifically which neighbors are the ones that are on your little graph there are against or for, that have submitted public information on this, okay?
Thank you, member. I appreciate that. And we'll note that next time.
Thank you.
Schmidt?
Question, is the only non-complying document the signed engineer's report? Is that really?
Yes, sir. So really for this request, that was the sort of the crux, if you will. Simply a report telling us that it was in fact damaged by the way that the applicant is claiming, as that is necessary for you to actually consider it. Without proof that it's been damaged, there are other means to accomplish this setback, but they are not through yourself. So that's really why we're here. Staff was unable to verify the validity of those documents, and so we're imploring that you do so through tonight's item.
Chris? Question to staff, was there any dispute or did you have any objections to the estimate provided by Shagley Brothers Foundation Repair?
So again, when it comes to proving damage, it was difficult for us to confirm that that was a suitable way to consider damage. The quote again was for redevelopment of the property, workings on the interior, that sort of thing. The applicant has claimed that the foundation has been damaged. However, the validity of those quotes to repair or improve upon was hard for us to classify as valid and actually determining damage. We specifically need to know the extent of damage, the extent of the appraised value at the time of damage, and consequently the time of damage is very critical for us in determining that. And that was the documentation that was unable to be sought during the review.
Yeah, it's just when it comes to things like this, and again, I apologize for interjecting my personal position, but I am also a professional engineer, and I am in the business of dealing with some of these kind of things, and it is exceedingly difficult to get when you're dealing with construction, it's not like you're pulling an item out of the Sears catalog, or maybe I dated myself by saying that, maybe on Amazon, where you have X many dollars per unit. There is a gray area, so we have to be professional and responsible and careful about that.
Absolutely, Member Frisbee, I appreciate that comment, and that's why we've brought it to you this evening. It is your authority to consider this item. Just simply staff's recommendation that you seek proof that you find sufficient in establishing that.
Yeah, just a quick one. Was it explained to the applicant when they made their submittal for the damages that the verification and the requirement of an engineering report was provided to them?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to ask them if they have a presentation. I'm going to ask them the same thing, because that is a key part of this.
Yes, sir. And so just to give you some background on how the review process goes, we received the submittal formally through our internal intake. one, if not the most pertinent comment that was made in the first review was said proof. So that was really the only review that was given for this item. That was really what we needed. The applicant did provide a document that I've included in the packet for your review as an engineer's report, but again, as stated in the report and in the presentation, it did not actually come with a certification from a professional engineer. So it was, we could not accept it as a valid document.
Thank you.
Did you ask them why it wasn't signed?
Yes, sir. We did ask if it was possible to have that there was an engineer's name. However, when we contacted that engineer, they notified us that document was not perhaps ready for submittal quite yet. And so we approached the applicant about said information. She informed us that she would like to move forward with tonight's hearing as is with the documentation submitted.
So they confirmed that it was their document, it just wasn't ready quite yet.
That's the gist of it, sir.
And one more question deals in the value piece. Did you guys think about doing a simple assessed value as opposed to make sure you guys talk about that kind of
Yes,
stuff?
sir. So, yes, had we received documentation that was suitable to be considered that it was damaged by a certain extent and proof that it was so, yes, there would have been a little bit more of an extensive look into the critical part is when the damage happened. And so with this being claimed in 2015, we would have gone to the Dallas County Appraisal District records to look at property values assessed and that sort of thing. We did so this morning just to take a look at values. Mostly it was related to the actual physical land and only dated back to 2020, so it would take a little bit more elbow grease, so to say, to take up that document from the county. But again, didn't quite get there in terms of the fact that the documents that were provided were not up to our standard.
Can you tell me what the assessed value was for the dwelling?
Property for the dwelling.
Well, the dwelling, this is obviously you guys are basing this on the value of the dwellings.
Right, Alex, we took a look this morning, didn't we? It was somewhere for the 2020 value. You report on what's something. The assessed value. The assessed value for the property, or for
Of the dwelling itself.
There was no assessed value that was
No assessed value.
available for the structure itself that was on the information, the DCAT information that was
Right.
online.
Right, and that DCAT information, for some reason, only dated back to 2020, so just a year ago. Again, the applicant's claiming that this damage happened in 2015.
Right.
So it would take a little bit more contacting the county as to where those records were.
Don't those records go back a few years? They show, if you go on down the line, they can.
Yes, sir, they should. So that, I do remember that in Alex and I's discussion this morning as to, assuming that this item, however this pans out this evening, if we have the opportunity to reassess, they'll verify the date. That is what's really critical, is the information of the date of damage, the way the code is written, in order for us to go back into those county records and assess when we need to be taking a look at the appraised value of the structure. And that was kind of the problem.
And how long have you guys had this piece of it? I mean, I don't remember seeing that timeline, but obviously the last applicant was concerned with all the timings it's taken to get through the red tape of things. And this is a case here where obviously they would have needed to, well in advance, we've known about this ourselves for a few weeks coming up. So the ability to get that kind of information, and I'm not trying to speak on behalf or against, I'm just simply saying that the due diligence on the city, I'm sure you guys are strained in certain areas, but
Certainly, and I can explain slightly, and it's the fact that we have no valid document to tell us when the damage happened. And so it's tough for us to expend those resources in finding that date. Had we had a document that we were sufficiently happy with in terms of proving to us that 50% of the property of the appraised value had been damaged by, then likely things would have changed. I've had a solid number for you this evening.
Am I correct in understanding that there's a dispute about how the house was damaged?
That's correct. How and how much and when. And that is generally what we need to, at least the code does not give us a hard and fast black and white document that is required to prove that. However, in our dealings with our engineering division here in the city, as well as our staff here at planning, the engineer's report was decided upon and relayed to the applicant as the necessary document to be provided to prove that.
To actually prove when it happened,
Say that again, I'm sorry.
to determine when it actually happened.
When and how much damage?
Is there really a relevance on when or how, other than the fact that this house is obviously damaged?
Yes, sir. There is relevance, and it is that we need that date in order to determine at what number when in the timeline to appraise the structure. So the way the code is written in the form-based code is that if it's damaged beyond 50% of its appraised value at the time of damage. And so it's tough for us to take a look at 2021, 2020 numbers whenever we're being told that it was damaged in 2015, but we have no document to prove that. Because that is when we would have to pull the assessed value from DCAP.
And this goes back to the fact that what they're trying to use to build the house with. I mean, obviously, the damage is, or the repair, is substantial.
Correct.
I mean, the alternative is this house sits there for another 5 or 10 years or whatever. Does it come right down to the building materials, or does it come down to, this is obviously North Shore again, so it's that kind of conversation that they got to meet the code.
Yes, I just want to reiterate, while this is in the North Shore district, the zoning district, even within the North Shore area, for this property and surrounding properties is rural neighborhood. And so this isn't allowed use. We're merely talking about the applicant using the code section that allows you to reinstate a non-conforming building setback. So the alternative is that perhaps the building, if the applicant is looking to remove the building completely and rebuild it, they either do so to the required build-to zone, which is 25 to 35 feet from the right-of-way, or perhaps they seek warrants from the setback via the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And so it is merely the clause about the 50% damage that is bringing for you this evening. It is nothing about use. It is merely location of building. The applicant is seeking to remove the existing structure, reestablish it in a non-conforming location, and is claiming that it was damaged beyond 50% of its appraised value.
All right, I think I'm kind of in favor of hearing what the applicant has to say. Another question?
Sorry, if the code official was to examine this home, would they determine it habitable?
I do not know the answer to that, and I'm not certain that.
Yeah, I will speak to one part is that, I've been on this board long enough that we addressed all those structures after the 2015 tornado. This was not one of them that came our direction. So not to dispute timelines, but it's just, is it habitable or not habitable is another good question to raise here.
Yes, it's also worth noting that when we did some research and homework on terms of the trajectory of the 2015 tornado, it was not within the proximity of this building. That's also worth noting. And just to answer your question previously, we've received this application formally within 30 to 45 days ago. Of course, we're also often in contact with our applicants prior to them actually submitting, but until we actually receive said payment, it's just necessary that I feel like put that out there.
One quick question for staff. In the event this effort to reestablish a non-conforming structure is denied tonight, does the applicant have an option or an avenue to go back to planning and zoning through the planning department to
Achieve that setback?
Yes.
Yes, sir, they do. So if this were to be denied, I foresee a couple different avenues. There's potentially an avenue where they come back to yourselves with sufficient documents.
documentation, correct?
Yes, there's that. There is, of course, the variance, which in the form-based code we call them warrants to the setback requirements. This one being a major warrant that the city council would have to act on after recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that is another avenue.
So there are alternatives should this be denied. I mean, I don't.
That's correct. Yes, sir. The short answer, yes.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Thank you very much. We'll come back to you. The applicant is here.
I own the property on 9114 Merritt Road, and my request is for the board to approve for the non-conforming residential structure on the property zone 4 Mason Royal Neighborhood District. I request the Board of Adjustment to allow rebuilding the new structure in the same location of the existing structure. The surrounding neighbors had no objections, and they approved the structure to be grandfathered in. The reason for that is because of the location, the structure is non-inhabitable. It's not habitable. So, and not only that, can you go to the next page? This is it's also an ag exemption, and it is a barn right there, as well as the a shed in the back of the house. So the it's when I did the when I went and get the appraisal on the house and do all the work for the foundation and everything, and that's why I submitted, it was more than 50% damage. So as a result, this house had to be demoed because it cost me just as much to repair it and to rebuild it. So, and then when I went to the city, they want me to push the house forward toward the street, which is like 25 to 30 feet. And the whole neighbor is 100 feet, 235 feet backward. So that means my house is gonna be like on a busy street because of the Merritt Road. Because now because of George Bush, and then you have the Merritt Road, which is very busy, and you have a lot of what's that? The building. There are a lot of builders are building in the area now, so you have more and more people coming in, and like you heard earlier, with their families that they start getting more violent in the area, and gun shooting and whatnot. So you push it so hard to the front, you get the street lights, you get the car noise, and you get everything that's surrounding the area, and then also thefts that can occur. So, and then the property itself has an ag, so if I push it up, look at how much land I have toward the back. I mean, it really doesn't make sense for us to move it forward, and it's become an eyesore. The neighborhood in that area, they're not gonna move anytime soon. None of those houses, they're gonna move forward soon. It's not like those houses like 150 years old or anything like that, where they're all gonna be demoed within 5 to 10 years. So I'm requesting that the variance approve my structure where it is, so that I can rebuild it to have more value. Right now, the house has no value. And in addition, can you turn to the next slide, please? So the structure is legally conforming structure at highest setback to accommodate farmhouses and agricultural buildings in the area. And the existing structure had damaged 15% from the tornado and severe storms. The reason why is the storm is not hitting in that neighborhood, but because of the debris and all that stuff, because the structure this house was built back in the 1960s or 1920s. They did not have enough foundation. They were building on blocks. So when the wind blows, it slides the whole house. It wasn't built back in the 70s or anything like that, where you build it on a foundation or more structured foundation, then I wouldn't mind remodeling them at all. But at this point, because of the structure was just building on the, I guess, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Frisbee, you were in engineering. They were built these houses on blocks. So any wind that coming through, that's why now it's not habitable. I can move in there. Even I remodel it, and look at the cost of the repair, almost like $40-something thousand just to repair the foundation alone, let alone the structure inside the house, which the city has provided onto my, I guess, I thought they were displayed into the screen. I wish I would have done that because I thought they would have do that. If you look in the pictures, he provided the structure of the building is already slanted and the cracks inside up. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. I thought he would have posted up. If not, I would have put in the slide because I wasn't sure what I was supposed to display and what the city is displaying, so I'm a little bit confused. So as you can see the structure in there, either I don't do anything and leave it like that, and the city would not make any money, or I build a home and there would be assessed value, and then the city would have some value to the home, and then of course it would be more for the city advantage to have me rebuilt where the house is more habitable than it is for me to push upward, which I was going to leave the land as is and just leave it as an egg and eventually sell it to a builder, and then they can put more houses in that area. So, and then the whole neighborhood is going to complain about it because it's going to be more noise. And so therefore I request that, can you go to the next slide, please? So right now, Merritt is a very busy street, creating a lot of noise. My house, well, we had a lot of lights shining to the house at night, and then it potentially theft because I have to move so close to the street and become an eyesore to the neighborhood. Right now, the setback is conforming with the whole neighborhood. So as a result, and now the Rowlett is building more and more houses, and eventually my house so close, eventually, if they're shooting or anything like that, it will hit into my house, especially when the car was driving. I mean, if they drive in and if they have a crash, it's just right into my yard or into my house where my kids were playing, and so on and so forth. And my kids were playing in there and they would get shot or something. And now that the North Shore neighborhood, the thing that I do not agree is I think they allow in that neighborhood to be 240 feet by 140, which is almost over half an acre lot. And yet they want to move the house 25 to 30 feet toward the street, and then you have so many land back there to do what? So it doesn't make any sense for this a city that put together this North Shore thing, where to beautify the area, yet you want to push it so close to the street that it doesn't seem viable to me. And so, and then I went to the neighborhood, I went to the neighbors, and then they all approved and approved with my new structure to build it at the same location. And can you scan through the, and below are the signatures approving in favor of the request. Can you just see there's a house, the neighbor number one said the owner should be able to grandfather in to build the house in the existing location to avoid noise, pollution, light pollution, and theft. And this is by Susie, and she lived right across the street from me, because her house is also 130 feet away from the street. And then she even had it gated so that no theft will go into her house and whatnot. And can you just go to the neighborhood number two? And then the neighborhood number two, the same thing, is that I want to build the house further from the Merritt, because Merritt is a busy road. So they agree building the house further from the road. So, and then if you go to number three, and then here again is that the owner should be able to rebuild the house where existing home is, and they're approving to rebuild, and then hoping that that the board members would approve the location where it is at. Can you go to number 3? And again, here is that maybe we should be able to grandfather into the house at the current location to avoid the street noise and the car lights. And then here again, the owner should be grandfathered in. So all of them are approved. So now if your board like disapprove, like the way you, like the way, you know, if the board disapprove, then that means there's no point that I would even build it at all because it's too close to the street and I guess, and then it's not very safe to build so close to the street, especially when you have so much land right in the back. And especially right now, it's an ag exemption.
All right, thank you. Questions for them?
As a point of protocol, just wanted to confirm your name. Typically, when a speaker comes, you give your name and your address, just for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Beth Wang. The address is 9114 Merritt Road, Rowlett.
Ma'am, I have a couple questions for you. Were you advised by the city that you needed a signed engineer's report to show that there was a 50% damage? Did they tell you that you needed to document the damage amount by a licensed engineer to the city in order to get all this stuff? I don't doubt anything that what you're saying is true. I mean, I know what you're talking about those houses. They're older houses. They're not conforming to the form-based code. But that's not the point in my mind. Did the city advise you to get an engineering report to document the damage from the tornado? With an engineer's report?
Yes, they advised me to get an engineering report, so which I did. They did not, at the time when I get my report, they did not request that it be signed. So they just said, well, all I have is just to go and get an engineering report, and that should be sufficient for them.
I think probably what has happened is that maybe you didn't understand what an engineering report was. And when the city requests for you to get an engineering report, that means that a licensed engineer provides a report to the city planning office and he's stating based on his knowledge and his training, that what the damage out there is correct and what you're saying is true. And unfortunately, what has happened is that rather than you doing that, you didn't do that. You just had an engineer write something up and give it to the city, and it doesn't conform to the procedure because it's not just you. Sometimes when things come before the city, we have an entire, as the Board of Adjustments, we're responsible for every citizen in Rowlett, not just you, not just people in the North Shore. And sometimes difficult decisions have to be made at this board or planning and zoning or whatever, because if we make it okay for one person, then everybody down the line that lives off of Merritt Road could come up and say, hey, you approved it for her, or you approved it for him. That is why we have these procedures. Now, I know that's why we have the Board of Adjustment too, to correct things that don't comply. But the fact is, the city, prior to you coming here tonight, the city, they told us that they advised you to get a signed engineering report, and you said you chose not to do that. Is that correct?
That is not correct. The reason is when they asked me to go get an engineering report, I went and get an engineering report per their instructions. When I submitted it to them, they will come back and said I needed to get it signed. So when I go back to the person that person, because the time frame, if they would have spoke to me that I needed signed to begin with, I would have done that. because I was just following their instructions, what I need to do, so to provide.
All right, I understand that. Now, the other thing I wanted to make sure that you understand is that however this goes tonight, there are alternatives. Nobody's expecting you to do anything, but you have heard in our previous conversation, because I asked staff, that you have alternatives, even should this be denied, and I have no idea how anybody's going to vote up here, that you can also go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you can go to the City Council for a PD, is that correct?
Major warrant.
Or
A warrant.
major warrant. But you have alternatives so that you could still, you have an avenue. This doesn't mean that you have to pack up your house and move it right up against the street. However this goes, it may be approved tonight, but I just want to make sure that you understand that, okay?
I understand that. My only downside is that we have to go through this over again to do the words and all that. I was working with another city person to do all this work before he retires. So by the time I get all the paperwork done, he retired. So therefore, he never approved of where the location is because of the new people now taking his place. So I was working with, I forgot his name now. He's already retired. So if I request, because this process has been taking so long, even with, I believe that was Robert, I've been communicating with him since last year to get this moving forward. I mean, it had taken very, very long time. So as a result, I was hoping that the Board of Adjustment approve this variance so that we can move on with the process.
Beth or Ms. Wang, I have several questions I wanted to ask you just to make sure that we clarify the record. Do you know what do you believe is the original value of the home and what are the damages?
The value right now, the CD is appraised as 1,000 because it's not habitable. And inside.
No, the original value of the house, how many thousands of dollars was it before the damages occurred? Because what we're trying to do, we're trying to derive an X number of dollars as the value of the home, and we're going to take half of that, and that's going to be the Y value of what the damages are versus what the half of the value would be. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out, because you've given us estimates for the repairs, but I'm just trying to pin down, I mean, I'm seeing here your Exhibit C from Packet Construction. I'm seeing a quote here for $284,000.
Yes, yes.
That was a contractor's
Yes.
estimate to you
Yes,
to rebuild the home.
Yes.
You know, I'm still not sure, and I'll ask staff later to clarify why this wasn't an acceptable amount, because to me, if the value of your home was, and not the entire property, because the land has to be excluded, if the, you know, if it's just under $600,000, I think you're there in terms of the cost estimate from this contractor. So that's point number one. What's very perplexing to me as an engineer is why another engineer would submit an unsigned letter. And I would like to add a kind of a fine legal point just for the edification of those in attendance and the board. A an engineering report should be at a minimum signed. It doesn't have to be sealed per se, because legally speaking, when an engineer signs a letter or signs a document as a professional engineer, which in this case J.S. Barton PE put his name to the document but didn't sign it, you know, they're correct. We can't put the full weight of the engineer's responsibility on this to verify that. So that's point number one. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sealed, but it did at a minimum need to be signed as a PE. Are you with me? So I'm wondering why he didn't sign it.
Yes, I can speak to that. The person that wrote that, he was an elder person. So when he came out with me, because they did not tell me what's sealed or get it signed, and I was just to have it so that I can give it to the city to go ahead and approve it, because the person, by the time I go back to the person who wrote this up, he has already retired, or I couldn't reach out to him. So as a result, when the board came back to me and said, why it's not signed or sealed, I couldn't get a hold of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And then the company, when I requested them, said, okay, the engineering decided, and it's going to cost me almost a substantial amount to get it signed, just to save it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Yeah, I understand. But just to be fair to you, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, I'm actually trying to help you. You know, the cost of generating the report is a lot less expensive than the cost of your home. And so I would like to propose potentially another alternative, which is that you table your petition temporarily and give yourself the time to get yourself at least 2 documents that are very important to our finding, that I just feel that we don't have enough information at this point to be able to reasonably approve or disapprove your petition. And that's the following. Number one, I would really like to see a number from you, and you could speak to other real estate agents in the area or other contractors as to what the value of your home was at the time of the damage back in 2015. That's number one. That's the X that I was referring to earlier, so that we can then divide that by half and say, okay, say if the value of your home was $500,000, and now we can say, okay, here are 2 or 3 contractors that have estimated that the damages to your home and the repairs amount to, like in this case, you have the one for $280-something thousand. I can very reasonably say, okay, I understand that. You know, clearly, this is more than 50% of the value. And based on my interpretation of the ordinance, I would say this is approvable. But the last caveat, and what really gives you a hook to hang on, is that you really should have a professional engineer's document, and I can assure you that there are plenty of engineers out there at a very reasonable cost that would be willing to help you if you would approach them. And in fact, you can call me, and I won't do it because that would be a conflict of interest per se, but I have plenty of relationships in the engineering business that would be very happy, or I'm sure even the city engineer could give you a list of engineers that have done work in the city, or you could get your own. I mean, all you have to do is Google engineers in the city of Dallas or city of Garland or anywhere in the vicinity. It's very easy to find an engineer, and your situation is not that complicated.
Well, I understand that, sir. The reason is that just to get, I mean, it's cost so much for me to get this far. I mean, it's just an engineering report. I mean, it costs a lot of money just to get the piece of letter signed. So that's why I talked to the city. I requested that, is there an alternative way for me to get this approval? And so they rather choose this route to go toward the board instead of doing the warrant like the way you said to do the alternative way. I mean, there is no alternative way to get this approval besides going in front of the board. So I was not given the alternative to go toward the warrant to get the warrant assigned. So because I understand that the engineering report was not signed, but the problem is to get that signed, it costs a lot of money to get the letter signed. And then to me, I just don't feel that, I don't know, it's hard, it's too hurtful to do this route. I mean, if we had to do the word side, I would have done that side, if that was given to me. But I was not given a direction. The only direction I was given was this direction, and then he asked to see if they want engineering. When I spoke with Alex, who is the manager of the city, they told me I don't need the engineering work. And now and then they turned around and said they required. And so I have conflicting information from the city themselves, because I did met with Dale, Jackson, and Alex, which is the manager of the urban and design. And he said the engineering report, it's good to have an engineering report, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, and I get that. And if you had had 2 or 3 other bids for the price, again, that's the Y number that I was telling you about. But I'm sorry, I'm an engineer. I think in terms of equations. But unless somewhere I have to have an X, I have to know how much was the value of your home before the damages. And I haven't seen staff provided. And to be honest with you, and I don't mean to pick on staff, but we really should have some sort of valuation. I really think some of the burden of proof really was, I mean, you guys are professionals, you should have been able to come up with something. And I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful. I would have liked to have seen, at least from the city's perspective, an initial number to start out with. And then I would have liked from you as the homeowner, you could have provided your tax reports from Dallas County of what you had paid back in 2014, 15, 16. That's public information. You could have said, well, the county said my property was worth $700,000, but maybe 100 of it was the price of the land, so we're back to the 600. Or maybe it was less than that, I don't know. But I don't have the information here to be able to make a judgment on that. Which, by the way, is another reason why I'm asking you very politely to consider tabling your request so that we as a group, both staff as well as you and your contractors, can get you decent numbers so that we look at the full picture. And I'm confident. My gut feeling is that what you're asking for is defendable and correct, but I've got to have the information to be able to make that judgment.
Yes, sir. I understand that. When I was working with the city, since they are professional and they've done this many times in the approval process, I was looking for their guidance to do the proper paperwork according to what you stated. But they did not advise me to go and get a proof of, what was the appraised value back then or what was the appraised value now. They did not advise me to go to do all the paperwork that you were suggested. I was looking to their guidance to lead me how to get this approval, so that I can get this approved. If I was given the proper guidance, I would have all the documentation that you need. But because I was not given the proper guidance, And then I was relying on the city to show me what documentation I need, because they done this all the time, where I don't ever do this. I only do this when once in a lifetime or twice or whatever. So that was my downside. Because if I would have known this, I would have done that. If they do all over again, I guess I would use your suggestion to do that.
Excuse me again, let me ask you a couple of questions then. What is the square footage of your home now?
It's around 2,500, or I think 2,500 square foot.
So 2,500 square feet. I'm just going to use some very rough numbers. And this is a very old home. If it were still habitable and it was still valued at $100 a square foot, which doesn't seem unreasonable, I get $250,000. And again, and I'm going off the cuff, but I'm just trying to use a little bit of horse sense here. You know, if you have a contractor who's given you an estimate to repair at $284,000, to me, you're not even at half. It's going to cost you more than what the value of your home is. But again, that's just me pulling numbers out of the air just based on what I know of property values are in general. But boy, I sure would love to have something a little more concrete so that I can help you to get what you're asking.
Yes, if you look at the property value, the city appraised, it was appraised at $1,000 because they went out there and appraised the value of the home as a current.
Right, as it is today.
As it is today, yes.
But that's Z, okay, that's another number altogether. We're still focusing on the X and the Y. But I respect what you're saying. I understand that currently the property is not habitable and therefore it has a minimal property value. What we're looking for is where the number started so that we can come up with where we are now.
Right, but if you look at the property, when it was built back in the 1960s. So that means, even though, let's say, it's still habitable, it probably around, like your pricing, like you indicated, around 200,000 the most, or 250 the most. And now, because of the damage, it is going to be a lot more to repair it. As the current status, it may cost more because of the structure, even a repair today, the foundation today, the way how it was built back then, even if I repair the foundation alone, not including anything else, it still probably not meet the standard, and it's still going to cost a lot more to do all that work.
Can I ask you a question? If we were to table this and the city was to continue to work with you, is there anything preventing you from getting the two pieces of relevant information to help us make a decision? One, the value of your home at the claim time of damage of 2015, and a signed engineer report indicating the damage of the foundation.
The problem with that is the engineer report is very costly. It wasn't something that, I can go in and get it done. Because the person that I went back to, he charged me quite a lot of substantial money to get approval. And the second thing is going back the timeline. We can get the timeline, but we can go back to the city to get the time report. As I think the city indicated, they can only go back 2000 time frame. So they could not go back far enough, further down. So
you don't have the ability to provide tax value of your property in 2015?
Because I don't keep track of all that, because I guess when I keep track of them is only when, from the IRS when you file the information. But after 5 years or 10 years, I don't have a record of it. But so as a result,
You can request that from Dallas County. They can provide that information to you.
Okay, I guess I can go and try it to get the request, but I'm not sure since the city indicated they could not go back further than 2000, so I'm not sure if I can go get the appraised value.
So again, I want to ask the question, if the city was to continue to work with you and we were able to table this, would you be able to go get the 2 pieces of information that they've asked for?
I can try, but I know the engineering report is going to cost an arm and a leg. I know that for sure, because I tried it when they come back, that they need to sign. Technically, when I submitted, I requested to see if they're acceptable. And then not only that, they told me that the engineer's report was not necessary, and I don't understand why they bring it up. So they shouldn't bring it up in the first place. And I think, yeah, because I communicated with the city along the line all this time. And then they told me that it wasn't that important to have the engineer sign. So I don't understand why he bring it up to the board.
Are you saying that the engineer report that you have would be required to go back and redo the entire report all over again, just to get a signature on it? I mean, how does that work, Louis? I mean, I would think if the engineering company did it, and they did it properly,
Yeah, it just seems very peculiar to me that the engineer of record sent you this letter without signing it. It just seems very, very questionable.
I can answer that. He sent it to me, and then I submitted to the city to see if that's acceptable. And then and then
We sent it to you as a draft, basically, to see if that was going to work. Is that?
yes, yeah.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
Yes. No, so that if the city said it had to be added more verbiage or whatever to get approval, we would have done that. But the city never.
So I have a question for staff. In the ordinance, does the city require an engineer's report or will a couple of estimates by a contractor suffice to answer the question of the valuation? Again, the X and the Y numbers. To me, the engineer's report is just a validation of those 2 numbers. But is it even required?
Member Frisbee, that's a great question. And the code is mute, basically, on the document itself that is required. I want to preface that when the document was sent to us, we digested that information internally from staff. As you probably are aware, Member Frisbee, the submitting documents that are not intended to be submitted on behalf of a professional engineer is a serious thing. And so we had to do a little bit of homework on our end, on the internal field, with our engineers to reach out to this specific named engineer to ensure that this was legitimate and that they did in fact provide this documentation. And we were notified that it wasn't intended to be submitted and it was submitted incorrectly, frankly. And so we do find that a very serious occurrence. However, to get perhaps back to your question, no, the code does not give us a hard and fast document. It's good practice within our office that a registered professional engineer or a like-minded individual of sorts and or appraisal, insurance appraisal information from time of damage, things like that, formal documents. Because all that we have now currently is quotes to tear down the building and rebuild it. And naturally that would be pricey, and naturally that might not be the condition in which the home was originally damaged at the time that it was claimed to be damaged. It is up to you to determine if that information is sufficient for yourselves to make that, as is your right per the code. I'm just letting you know that it is not staff's position that the documents provided are sufficient enough in determining that. That is what we're.
Right. There's a lot of ambiguities here because it's, clearly it's an older home. There's a lot of damage. The timing of when the damage occurred is one thing. I know that, again, based on my experience in the field, I know that a lot of times There's the initial damage that occurs to a structure because of the tragic event. And then there are subsequent damages that, as a result, if a structure isn't weatherproofed or sealed, you can have pipes bursting when it freezes. You can have water leakage. You can have all sorts of complicating issues that add to that. The problem is that, you know, it's for us, at least from this point, it's nearly impossible to discern that, but we can make an educated guess that if it was an older home subjected to a tornado, and Mrs. Wang has a very valid point, those old structures were not designed or built to take that kind of a load at that time, so it's very easy to see. And again, I really wish I had that X number of, say, $250,000, $300,000, $400,000 to say, okay, that's where I started, and now I'm at nearly $300,000 to repair these damages.
Sure. And if the documents provided you this evening, the presentation from the applicant are sufficient in order for you to determine that, that is your prerogative as the board to do so. Again, I just want to reiterate that the documents provided to staff were not up to that standard of proving, again, when and how much. That is really the critical question for us in this. And then, of course, after that, it is really the question of if the proposed setback is also permissible. So.
Couple quick things. I'm sure I was to ask a question. We did. Okay, so question one is, ma'am, when did you buy the property? Don't know where I got question for you too. When did you buy the property, ma'am?
I bought it in 2015.
You bought it in 2015?
14 or 15, one of those, yes, I bought a while back. It was 14 or 15.
And how much did you pay for the property?
I paid $300,000.
300,000 for the lot and the property that was on it?
Yes.
Trolley?
Yes.
And this, the question she has about moving forward, that stripped down Merritt, are there any other houses down through there that get so close to the road? I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I've been down Merritt.
Sure. So and perhaps, Susan, would you mind could you put up my presentation, please, Susan? The staff presentation. That's a fair question, Chairman. I'll preface while Susan brings this up for us. Thank you, Susan.
Just kind of raises the question, if we're going to demand, if we're going to request that all the new form-based subdivisions move all your houses to the front roads, then sure, because that whole area, if I'm not mistaken, is really like a lot of land.
That's correct, and it's a fair question because I know that this might seem like a sort of a pioneering case, and perhaps that is stirring up this question specifically. And perhaps, I know I've got a better image, that's one there. In fact, I might have.
That was a good image, actually.
Okay.
I don't see any houses that are close to the road there, but.
Right, and as stated in the presentation in the report, it's critical to note that in order to retroactively enforce and succeed in your code standards, it has to be able to be achieved after the code has been implemented. And so what we do when we pass development codes is, yes, these are all legally non-conforming buildings. However, in instances where they do need to be redone or repaired or taken down, there are certain avenues, such as the one we're in tonight, for you to allow that to happen. However, the alternative, as I must say, was iterated to the applicant repeatedly. I do want to put that out there, despite her claims that it was not.
But
as reiterated very explicitly to her, the vision, and it is good urban principle, is to have buildings closer to streets. I know this seems like a large road, however, it is only a 4-lane divided thoroughfare with a moderate speed, and it is at its maximum build out. And so it is good urban principle to move buildings closer to streets. There are concepts such as eyes on the street that in fact assist in reducing crime, assist in slowing traffic, things like that. And so that's really the requirement of the form-based code. It's not so much staff's opinion, it's the requirement of the code.
I agree with those. So the other question I have, Dale's, if she purchased the property in, say, 14 or 15, like any purchase of property, you have to get the house appraised.
That's correct.
And so if she had the documents of purchase, which would include the appraisals, and if she paid $300,000 for the entire whatever lot it was, would that not in itself act as a value base to what that land is worth in that house? I mean, but you're talking about that's going to cost her more, well, not quite as much, to build the house back as what it was for her to pay for the entire lot and everything. So when you're looking for documentation, would that not be sufficient enough to just provide the purchase, which comes with your appraisal? It's required in any purchase that you would have that. So that in itself gives proof prior to the tornado of what the value of your property was. So aside of that, I mean, to me, that would be the most quick, easy answer to solve that one part that you're asking for.
Sure. And I think you've sort of answered my response to that with that last sentence, that one part. So there are multiple documents and things that are necessary. One is the timing of damage, and I know that we've seen photos of damage. However, we do not know the extent of it. We do not know when it happened, if it was progressive, such as it was true. And again, you might have a different opinion than staff on this, and then which is your prerogative as a board. That's why we're here. It is our opinion as staff, amongst our engineering folks on staff, as well as the planning folks, that we need a sort of pin in time as to when the damage occurred, and make sure that it was not self-inflicted through a renovation, as that would not be acceptable. While the code doesn't specify damage by natural means, it does not protect you from just simply damaging it yourself. And so those are things that you should take into consideration if you feel that it is your prerogative. Interpretive.
So that same documentation at purchase, where you had an evaluation of the value of the home, would also indicate if there were structural issues at that time.
It should, yes.
You could prove that it happened after purchase, say 2014 or 2015.
Yes, that is true. That is not information that was provided to staff through this review.
And part of this gets back into part of the comment that Mr. Christmas said was about the, it would be really kind of beneficial to the public if the staff were able, as much as you have a strain on your time as it is, to be able to help guide them down that path. I mean, as simple as I'm sitting here today and it just hit me like a ton of bricks, like, well, just when did you buy the property? And then grab that appraisal and that solves that proof. Then, because it was just recently, at that 14, 15 timeline, that solves that. Then you get down to the other entity. You had an engineering report. I don't know why, ma'am, that they didn't sign that. If they did the report, I would think it'd be nothing to simply go back and say, okay, take this from what your assessment was to just sign off on it as being correct. And then you're done. And then you could prove that if the house was worth that. I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because you're trying to get proof of the house was valued before, but you'd never be able to prove, I guess, that the tornado itself damaged it, as you said yourself. It really wasn't the path of the tornado that went down through there, but inconsequential damage, I guess. I mean, these are really old houses down through there, but I mean, I'm not seeing, I can't even imagine why, from the North Shore perspective, take any of those houses and try to attempt to move them all forward at any point in time. I just don't, I know we love concepts, I know we love the ideas that they represent, but again, trying to get them moved down there.
Right. And I, sort of kind of a two-part answer on my end. The claims that we have not been responsive or not been supportive, not been helpful, I find personally troubling. I know, I absolutely understand that. I just want that to be stated.
Sure.
Alternatively, all of the avenues to achieve what the applicant has wanted to do this whole time, redevelop the property in its current state. That's really what we're here for.
Yes.
All of those avenues have been explicitly stated to the applicant. Likewise, I understand that it might not make the most sense at first glance to picture, it's tough to visualize this street in the future, however, nonetheless, it is the code requirement. And so it is not so much whether we agree with the code requirement. That is not what we're here to determine. We're simply here to determine. You see where I'm going with this, so.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely. Yes.
May I ask you another question? talking through all the other opportunities to prove value in 2015, would you be able to come back if we table this item tonight and provide your purchase information perhaps as proof of value of your home? Possibly allowing us to skip over the engineering report?
Yes, I can provide that, the documentation for when the property was purchased.
And the value?
And the value of, and then I think I probably have the appraisal at the time as well.
Okay, thank you.
This one's for staff. Staff, these are tough decisions that are to come before Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning, and City Council for the next few years because of the transition of the North Shore area of the city of Rowlett from what it was, which was single-family homes on multiple, SF40 or larger acreages with single houses on them that are set back from the road when Merritt Road was a 2-lane little highway, to what every citizen of Rowlett is expecting someday is development in the North Shore, which is what there is different zoning of it. There's urban neighborhood, there's commercial development, future job business. What staff, is it not to be expected that in this transition period, somebody is not going to be advised correctly on how to navigate through rehabbing an existing house? Because I'm starting to see here that the applicant has been poorly advised, and that nobody is expecting anybody to move any houses. What it seems to me is that you're trying, as an applicant, to go around the procedures for getting your house that you own now rehabbed. There are ways to do that, and the number one way would be to get an engineering report to prove that this damage happened at this particular time, and this cash amount of damages as a percentage of the appraised value of the house complies. And we have these requirements because tonight it might be Mrs. Huang who wants to fix her house, but tomorrow it might be State Farm wanting to build a multi-million-dollar thing out there and trying to skirt the rules. And so we have these procedures. As tough as they are, it's not to hassle the applicants. It is to protect every citizen's right and to expect that every board and the city council develops the North Shore to the benefit of every citizen in Rowlett. It sounds to me like the city has tried to tell you that they needed to have this type of report to navigate through this system in order for you to fix your house. Is that not correct?
That is not.
And that you, ma'am, are sort of trying to ram this through without following the procedures. I know that an engineer's report is expensive, but those are the procedures that our city has so that every citizen of Rowlett can benefit from where you live at. Nobody's expecting you to move your house, but there are procedures that are required for you to rehabilitate the house that you've got. And I think that you were advised by staff how to do that. I know that it's expensive, and there is some cost involved there, but it sounds to me like the city tried multiple times to advise you of this, and that you did not want to get the signed engineer's report. There is a difference between an unsigned engineer's report and a signed engineer's report. An unsigned anything is just a piece of paper. When an engineering report is because there's a fiduciary responsibility of every city employee and us, we have to look out for that. And so unfortunately, there are some expenses involved, and the expense is getting a proper engineering report in order to determine whether your house can be rehabilitated where it sits right now. That's all that the city has tried to do, it sounds to me. So my last question to you is that, is there some way that we can, that should this be denied tonight, maybe the city could advise Mrs. Huang to the correct procedure, and we're not talking about moving your house, but the correct procedure for reapplying or to go to a PD or to go, it costs nothing to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it costs nothing to go to the city council on this, to go for a warrant, a major warrant, to get your house approved. It seems to me that that would have been something that you should have thought of, and if you hadn't thought of it earlier, maybe now you might consider that should this be denied. However, and again, it could be something that the commission says, yes, it's fine. But I know that based on what I've heard so far, I'm not going to support your recommendation, ma'am, or your request. I'm going to support the information provided by the city.
Let me ask you right quick too. The two documents you need, just for clarification, it's been kind of ongoing now, so kind of a blur, but it becomes an appraised value and at least an engineer's reward. If those two were in place, if you have those two, if we have those two tonight, then it becomes just a choice of this board whether or not we want to accept that and extend to her the ability to redo her house. Is that correct?
Those are the documents that you need as a board to make an educated decision on this matter, and that is your prerogative to do so. So I think in short answer, yes, with the asterisk that even with the documentation provided tonight, you might find that sufficient. Just know that even with that documentation, there is still the consideration on the design criteria of the form-based code that staff will also be essentially making a recommendation on in terms of build-to.
But if we vote in favor of the variance, does that give her the right to be able to
It sure does. Yes,
the house?
it does. And just to go back, just briefly, if you don't mind, Chairman, to Board Member Mosley's concerns, oftentimes before an applicant makes that formal application, exchanges that fee to activate a project number with us in the city, we do oftentimes speak with them many times about their end goal and how to get there. And so we did lay out a roadmap of warrants complying with code. There's also this potential that it's been damaged, and that it's when we activated sort of that thought that the applicant decided that was in fact what happened, and they moved forward with this application. So after they've made that application, all we can do is review it for validity as the type of Board of Adjustment application that it is, and tell the applicant that we might not be recommending in favor for XYZ reason as we have done up until this point. So that's the reason this is before you tonight, and that the applicant has been advised that a warrant or just strict compliance with the code are alternatives to their objective to develop this property. So just to be clear about your sort of open-ended question.
I was going to ask, is there a need for the staff to clarify statements made about costs going in different routes?
Yes, there is a clarification that's needed. So a major warrant does come with a fee for review. It is a two-report, two-noticing event that is quite extensive, having to go to both the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. Obviously, the alternative is that this property is redeveloped in compliance with the zoning standard, in which case there is no necessary action other than the building permit.
Okay. So let's do this. We will have to talk about it in a couple minutes, but unless there's any other questions for staff at the second and for the applicant, this is a public hearing. So I need to open it up to the public, give an opportunity, and I do have a card. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
Can I add one more thing? When I go onto this board, I wasn't aware of the warrant. I would have gone to the warrant if that was, make this process a little bit better. I would have done that route if I had known that. I wasn't advised about the warrant until today with the board members. And also the engineering report, it wasn't my intent to submit them. My intent was to provide, I did not submit the engineering report through the proper process. I submitted the report to have them validate to see if it's sufficient. So as a result, it should have not presented to the board in the first place. That's where I'm planning, I want to state that. There are two things that if I would have advised the warrant, and then if I would advise this route, which is go do the DOA, I would have done the more efficient way, which is to the warrant. Even if it cost me more, but at least I get the results set without going to the board and speak here up in the public record and whatnot. So as a result, I wish that the city personnel would have been more study what they need to do so that they can advise people, applicant like me, to do the proper process if we understood how it's being done. And going back to the route of, it was indicated that he'd been advising me that the street will not expand and whatnot. Did not the city realize that Rowlett is expanding? There could be more and more houses coming up. There are already houses across the street or start building. So Merritt Road is going to be extremely busy in the near future because more and more houses in that area are being building and then more land is being sold. And eventually there's a landfill next door. Eventually that landfill is going to be sold out to more residential and whatnot. So that means the Merritt Road is going to be overly populated with neighbors.
All right, thank you so very much. Moving to the public hearing aspect, is there anyone here who wants to speak on behalf of, I have one card from Susie Rios. That's you? Come on down there. And if you could for the record again, give us your name and your address.
Okay, my name is Roxana Cindy Rios, and my address is 8823 Merritt Road. So I'm actually across the street. And boy, I just want to thank you all and the city, because I think we all are caught in this, like Mr. Mosley said, in this transition in this little area here. And there's a lot. Back when my daddy built our house back in 1983, 84, we were in compliance. You know, we were told to build back from the road. And things changed. So I hear you too. Now they're saying to build forward. So most of the houses are in compliance because we were built back the way we're supposed to be. I told Ms. Wong, you know, when they bought that house, she's like, boy, am I going to have to move forward? And the only thing I can think of was when the lights came up, it was a 2-lane road. You know, I was there when it was a 2-lane road, and there weren't no street lights. But the lights did shine into my bedroom. All of a sudden, there's lights, even though I have shutters, there's lights. So there's light pollution, and then you have noise pollution. You hear the traffic, and the traffic, there's more traffic. So I was in favor for Ms. Wong to keep the house in compliance back in the days, like it was, kind of grandfathered, I don't know. And I hear you, because you're trying to stay in compliance and do the black and white, like you said, Mr. Schmitz, you have to stay kind of in the black and white. I hear that too. But if possible, I just thought it would cost her more money trying to build this house 20 to 30 feet versus 130 feet for where we're at. And I do know that to the noise, she'll have a lot more noise pollution, and that's bad for your health. I mean, that's a fact. Noise pollution is bad for your health. And not just the noise pollution, she'll have that light shining right into her home, you know, at night. That's no fun. You know, I have to get blackout curtains, and I'm more than 130 feet from that road. And that's why I told her I'd come and speak for her, because of the same reason, that I know what it's like when it was 1985, and now I know what it's like today. And that's all I have to say. And thank you for staying late and doing a great job. And I know everybody's trying to do what's right, so thank you also. So that's all I have to say, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, we as a board have a couple things to think about when it comes to what route to go.
Chairman, I have
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. I would work with that.
Sorry for interrupting there. This comes from Shelby Roots.
Your mic isn't on, it's just speak
I could be in
louder.
the same situation as Susan and talking about that. Hey, there you go. So we'll do that from here. 913 Merritt Road, Shelley Rhodes is the person that sent this in. I agree to the request of a building a home where the existing but non-livable home sits currently. With as much property as she has and directly across from my home is going to look visibly better, I vote in favor of the request. In addition, the way Merritt Road was constructed with no turn-ins for residents causing more U-turns and etc., and the increase in traffic should be considered as well, as a home being closer to Merritt Road wouldn't align with the other homes, looking odd, and this would be safer and nicer physically.
Thank you. All right, so obviously in our attempts to make some decisions about which route to go, I mean, to me, there's a couple options. One is we could simply table this, and for whatever period of time that we choose.
Excuse me, Chair. We need to close the public hearing.
It went dark. Sorry. We could table this, giving you an opportunity.
Close the public hearing.
Oh, you are so correct. You see, it's so late. My apologies. That being said, then we will close the public hearing. Therefore, I can have the rights to have my choosing of words here. So, I don't think we're having this late. So, again, option one is for us to simply table it, to give you enough time to try to put together the documents that they're asking for, which would be the minimum number to come back to us on. Even with that, officially, it would be up to the board consensus to approve that for you. The other option is to, of course, deny you what your variance ask is, then ask you to work more closely with the city and have them help guide you better to another route. Maybe it's through planning and zoning or it's through warrants or whatever it be. I'm not well versed in that area. I, for one, I would not want to see your house go forward. I think the aesthetics are not going to be correct. I would think on your behalf you would want to do whatever you could to be able to replace that home where you're at right now. That makes so much more sense to me. But there are a couple of steps that you would need to go through. Again, to not quantify any comments about staff or not staff usually as a whole is very professional about what they do. We commend them more times than not about the stuff that they do, but there are just some simple basic requirements that are required. So to me, we have a couple of choices. One is to be able to either extend you some time or to deny your request. And this becomes a question within the board to have a discussion back and forth. So I would open that for discussion as far as the thought.
Yeah, I would just chime in. I totally agree with you, Chris. Ms. Wang, I hope you're listening carefully to the advice. We are homeowners just like you, and we are certainly putting our feet in your shoes. We're really trying to help you. Just remember what happened in the previous case. If just one person at this dais tonight votes not in favor of your petition, you're done. Even if you get 3 out of 4, it's, you're not in good shape. I would seriously hope that you would take Mr. Kassar's advice and on your own table this petition until 2-3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Get your information together so that you could defend your case better. And I would hope and pray that staff will be professional and thorough enough to do their part as professionals, but also as public servants in the interest of serving the citizens of Rowlett, to do the right thing. So I'm trying to put the burden back on all of you. I know the way I would vote now, but I just think it's going to be cleaner if you would just come to the speaker and take our advice. The other option is, do we as a board say, well, regardless of what you want to do, ma'am, maybe we just choose amongst ourselves to tell you to go back and get your documents together and table this for the next month's meeting. I don't know. I've never been down this road before, so I don't know what the proper scenario would be.
Yeah, I'd like to also comment on how I know I have to vote tonight. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to table this.
For how long?
30 days. I'd like to make a motion to table for 30 days.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to table your request with enough time to run down and get that done if you can. So with the motion already made and seconded, it just simply is a vote right now.
Can you tell me what table is just the,
It means we're going to postpone it,
oh,
the decision for 30 days to give you a chance to go get the documents that we've asked for.
what documentation are you requesting? I know one of which is the appraisal, correct?
One was the appraisal, which we recommended back with your 2015 or 14 purchase, and the other was the civil engineer's signature.
All right.
Okay with that? So again, we have a motion to table for 30 days to give the applicant a chance. We have a second. One vote, please. Favor is approved, so you're not denying. So take a moment, go back and see if you can get those documents and then come back and see us. Okay, thank you so much. Due to the circumstance of extended meeting tonight, we're going to take about a 2, 3, 5 minute break right quick, and then come right back to hear the final one. So thank you for your patience back in the back. I'm sure you're the applicant.
Yes, sir.
So put up, please.
When I said that it sounded like you guys are not trying to follow the history.
No, I understand.
When I said that, I was like, what God, that's really something awful. I didn't even know that. When I said it, I was told it something.
Good to see you in person.
No, I think what I understood
Yeah,
was,
right.
you know, that that's why it's
Board member votes, and it takes a lot of restraint for me not to play chair. Every time I talk chair. I know, exactly. I'm like, not chair. Not chair.
It's not all, those are not
I just saw this.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So the problem is that we can.
Make sure you let them know about that.
Sure, I'll focus on that.
Agreed.
Yeah, try to get this.
Well, maybe you can tell us what color you need to make. Orange.
Been a while, hasn't it? What? No, we don't do that. We don't operate that way. So we have made a long-range planning contest. We're really excited about that.
True, the truth of our printer.
Right.
Grown a bit. Apartments grown a bit. Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna come that way because I cannot hear anything. I think it's age, but anyway, but. Should we start with the long range? Or all right.
That's what you get all these things.
Is this the same slide?
Is it? Yeah, it is. It is.
This also says like.
Yeah, this is it. You're right, that is.
We just made it.
That's kind of like, they don't want
Yes, that is almost like. I'll ask her when I get a call. Easy enough?
Okay.
I know, I'm like, oh, God. Robert? Yeah. Part of it is not.
I'll move quickly with my presentation.
All right. Thank you for your patience. We're going to be starting the back again so we can wrap this up.
So stressed out.
So item 4D is to conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by Stephen? Stefan? Sansone? Pretty close. For variance to section 77-303.c.7c of the Rowlett Development Code to reduce the side setback for an existing carport from 3 feet to 1.5 feet on property zone single-family residential SF-10 district. The subject property is located at 8010 Garner Road, being block 1, lot 2 of the site of Fozzie Addition, approximately 1,473 feet west of the intersection of Dowrock and Garner Roads in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. And staff.
All right. So this here is, again, the restatement of this request. The property is zoned SF10, and you can see it is outlined in red. It is a typical 10,000 plus 10,800 square foot lot. I believe is what the dimensions end up being within a residential neighborhood. The detached carport accessible from the rear alley was installed without a permit. So therefore, there was no site plan review. There was no working with the applicant on options for the installation of this carport. It was set 1.5 feet from the east property line, and the minimum setback is 3 feet from that property line. Would also state that setbacks are intended to provide separation to enhance fire protection, also to minimize conflict between neighbors over those specific improvements, as well as to allow sufficient area for maintenance. Property does have it has a 1,990 square foot home. The carport is 850 square feet in area. The total lot coverage for all the existing structures, which would also include the carport as well as the pavement, is less than the 45% maximum lot coverage in that SF10 district. Would also note that there are 4 other properties within that 500-foot courtesy notification radius, which do have rear carports. Considerations for the board, you'll see here on the right would be a photo, recent photo taken of this carport, also with the notation which you can see that setback from the fence, which is on the property line, of 1.5 feet. Again, the specific requirements for setbacks are 3 feet for the rear and the side. Maximum area of the carport is 500 square feet, and the maximum height of that carport may not exceed the height of the primary structure on the lot. As you can see from the photograph there, the carport is a pre-engineered metal structure, and we estimate the height to be 15 feet and less than the height of the home. So the carport also exceeds the maximum allowed area of 500 square feet under the requirements of the Rowlett Development Code. In order to get consideration for that, the City Council must grant a special use permit. Should this variance be granted by the board, the applicant would then pursue that SUP. It is also worth noting that a variance may not be considered in conjunction with the SUP, which is why we're seeing this two-step process, which would be for the consideration of that variance to the side setback, and then moving forward for consideration of the special use permit regarding the area of the carport. Other considerations that would be involved in this would be to note that the applicant, in their application materials and conversation, had requested and expected the carport installer to obtain all the required permits. Again, that was not done. A citation was issued by the Building Safety Division of the city for the following reasons: that the east side of the setback was insufficient, as well as the size of the carport does exceed the 500 square feet. There has been conflict between the applicant and the carport installation company over who is responsible for both the obtaining the permits for this carport as well as that installation. And so that is why the applicant is now pursuing this variance process in order to have that carport remain at the current location. Secondly, that the carport must again get that SUP to allow that carport that requires the 500 square, I'm sorry, for the carport in excess of 500 square feet. Per section 21109A3 of the Texas Local Government Code, the Board of Adjustment should determine if this request is contrary to the public interest. If due to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship, and so the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. In our own Rowlett Development Code, we have additional verbiage on variances. That the purpose of the process for variances is to provide limited relief from the requirements of the code, where strict application of a particular requirement will create an unnecessary hardship, prohibiting the use of land in a manner otherwise allowed by the RDC. Secondly, it's not intended that variance would be granted merely to remove inconveniences or financial burdens that are imposed upon a property owned by the requirements of the code. Variance is intended to provide relief where requirements render the land difficult or impossible to use because some unique physical attribute of the property or some other factor unique to the property for which the variance is requested. And lastly, variance is intended to be permanent in nature, to run with the land or the use associated with the variance. The following section of the RDC also says that a variance is an exemption from the literal terms of the ordinance. That also avoids an unnecessary hardship caused by special conditions associated with the property. This unnecessary hardship must be unique to the property, arising from topographical, geographical, physical, or dimensional features of the property, and not due to the owner or the occupant. A variance is appropriate in unique circumstances to allow for limited exceptions from setbacks, lot width, depth, coverage, those typical kinds of standards. It shall not be granted based on market conditions, economic factors, profitability, marketability, feasibility. And the variance shall not be granted if contrary to the public interest, and if granted, the spirit of regulations must be observed and substantial justice done. Again, we note the notifications, that there were 21 notices sent out within a 200-foot radius, of which 2 were received in favor, 0 in opposition. The courtesy notice within 500 feet, 66 were sent out, also 0 in opposition and 2 were in favor. Also, I believe that we have gotten some more information that we provided to you after we sent out our notification, our packet your way last week. Staff's recommendation is for denial of this request for variance to reduce the side setback from 3 feet to 1.5 feet. Again, there are no physical characteristics that are unique to this property stemming from topography, geography, or the property dimensions in order to warrant the issuance, the granting of a variance. But also note that this carport was installed without a permit, was not reviewed for compliance with the RDC. With that, any questions that you have?
Those any questions from staff? Most doesn't, so. Schmidt, question for staff?
I believe I read in our packet that this is actually an active issue with the city attorney. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer this to Dale Jackson, our building official, chief building official, because he'd have more information on how that has worked its way through the city court system.
Now, this particular case was, a citation was issued by our previous building inspector, who first came to our attention approximately 2.5 years ago that the building was constructed, or the carport was constructed without a permit. The carport, to provide a little bit more background information, the carport installer claimed that they did not install the carport, that they provided the materials of the carport. The owner of the property indicated that no, he hired them to build the carport on his property. He did issue a citation. The inspector subsequently left and went to another city. That case was running up against the statute of limitations of 2 years. And so we advised the court at that point in time that we would pursue this as a Building and Standards Commission case. And as you're aware, the Building and Standards Commission was recently created by the City Council to hear cases of buildings that were either substandard or built in violation of the code, and authorizes the city to declare the demolition of that building. And so what we indicated to the court is that we would take this as a Building and Standards case and request that the carport be demolished, and that be worked out between the property owner and the carport installer as a civil case between the two of them, because this did not comply with the setbacks, and there was no movement at all to comply with the setbacks on anyone's part.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Christie.
Just for the record, I believe that we got an extended set of data, including one negative reply from an adjacent homeowner, is that correct? So just want to make sure that, did we read that into the record, that there was that concern?
Yes, you would be correct that was a late addition that we received earlier today that we provided to you both in, I believe the email was sent your direction. We also have a physical copy for you. I've also shared that with the applicant this evening. Yes.
Any other questions? The applicant, of course, is here if you'd like to come up and speak on the case itself. On the request. Please give your name again and the address, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. My name is Stephen Sanson. I'm the owner of 8010 Conroe Road here in Rowlett, Texas. And actually a little embarrassed about this whole debacle. And I was kind of sold a bill of goods by the installer, who also did this to another property owner in Rowlett. My background, a little bit about me, is I'm 100% disabled Marine Corps veteran, and I would save for a little time to put this up so that I could negate the cost of storing the travel trailer at a storage facility. I had it at one probably about a year and a half ago. I got about 2.5 years ago, actually. It was longer than this now. And it got broken into, unfortunately. But I've always respected and abided by going by the rules and regulations on the city attorney. Mrs. Amy Thomas asked me to be a witness in this carport company. I gladly agreed because I knew that would afford me some leverage to work with the carport company to bring it into compliance, which the carport company had notified the city attorney and said that they were willing to work with me on this, and that never materialized, and I even tried to contact them after the courts had dropped the case, and they said they weren't going to work with me, basically. So I had lost all my leverage in that case. The carport investment, like I said, was meant to cut a lot of the storage costs out for the trailer. And being a disabled vet, there's a lot of limitations physically for me. I can't do a lot of stuff that I did before when I was a little younger. So storing this at my house, allowed to store the travel trailer over there in my truck as well underneath the carport. The past 2 years, it's been kind of tough because my property got burglarized 3 times. I had stuff stolen out of my truck broken into. So securing my property, my next step was to put a rolling gate at the end of the driveway to stop intrusions onto the property. The whole working with the city thing, I was really trying to do that over the past 2 years. But the exemption here for the fence distance being 18 inches needed on the northernmost part and 10 inches needed on the southernmost part next to the alley was, being a former firefighter as well, I understand the ease of access for emergency services. It being carport, it really has no restrictions on entering or having to go by the fence line for any reason, really. You can go down the center of the carport, which is plenty of room even with the truck and the trailer there. You've got a few feet in between the western edge of the driveway, the center of the driveway, between the truck and trailer, and on the fence line. In summation, basically what I'm requesting is your consideration for the variance to be granted for those inches needed. Being on limited income, I would have to pay to have this removed, and then possibly wait a couple more years before I can afford putting up another structure and go back to storing the trailer somewhere else where I have to pay for it on a monthly basis. The whole due diligence on my part, I had gone around and collected 29 signatures from the neighbors almost within the 500-foot area, saying that they don't mind it being there. The neighbor that did dissent towards this, we've never seen eye to eye. I mean, I respect her as a neighbor. We just don't converse. And she had a personal problem with noise from the Harley that I have in my driveway. So if I had started up at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, it was, it all kind of stemmed from there. So everyone except her in the immediate area signed a petition. When she spoke to me about that, she gave me the reason that she lost her view over the fence. And quite frankly, none of us in that area had a view of anything over our fences. And the sky isn't owned by anybody. So if we had a waterfront lot, I could see how that could affect something like that. But none of us are in that position of having waterfront property. The signatures, I'm not sure if they were submitted with the whole packet that I faxed to you or emailed to you, all the signatures back after we had the phone call. But I have a copy of them if you need them, of all the neighbors in the area.
I would trust you that you got your neighbors to sign off on it. I don't really need to see that, so I can see why you got the paperwork.
It's, I guess I really have nothing else to say except for thank you for your time. It's just, like I said, kind of an embarrassment to be here because I was sold the bill of goods by the carport installer. I just never thought it would come to this point. So I appreciate your time, gentlemen. And I Services.
Board have any questions for the applicant? I just have one. Did you build the carport?
No, sir.
Thought
I couldn't put that up.
Thought I'd ask that question, so. All right, thank you. So there's one question I have for the staff, not you, sir, thank you. I guess if they get approved or from here, it would be an SUP to council, is that correct? Just for clarification, that's the option.
Yes, that is correct.
And if denied, you're going to ask them to tear it down?
If denied, we would come back, I would understand that we would go through the process of you would be required to be removed, and if we're not removed, then we would do as Yale suggested, and have an item before you as your role as the building.
No. We dealt with that, which one I go, so. Okay, thank you. All right, hearing no more of those, of course, this is a public hearing, so we'll open the floor to the public. If there's anyone here which doesn't look like that, I understand we have a couple of readings from, I guess, email. So,
This is from Michael Tim Edwards, 8013 Wayne Way, Rowlett, Texas. I have lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years and travel up and down this alley at least twice a day. I have no objection to Mr. Sansone's carport at all, and personally think that this is a waste of time and taxpayer money, which I have been paying since 1990. And this comment comes from Mike and Jean Dalton at 8017 Wayne Way. We have no problem with the size, height, or placement of this carport. It just seems that he's trying to protect his vehicles and RV. And those are the only two comments that we have from the email.
all right, thank you. There's no other options in the public. We will close the public hearing and open up to the board to have thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of those tough decisions that another one tonight that we're going to have to make, and it's errors were made by the applicant not pulling a permit, and this carport is non-compliant for more than one reason, because it's too big, it's too close to the property line. I will not be supporting this. It's because we cannot, if we approve this for you, then every other one that comes down the line is going to cite this one. Why you approved it for him, but you didn't approve it for me. I sympathize with you, sir, but I think that you made a mistake by getting this done without a permit. And if you had the permit, whether your contractor told you to or not, they could have saved you all this, obviously, but they didn't, and I will not be supporting this.
Schmidt, was it the same? No? All right, I always, and obviously always feel compelled, at least the last word of some nature. Aside of some faults that you probably should have addressed, or maybe you thought you were addressing, and maybe that's part of it here as well. I don't look at my constituent, Mr. Mosley, as precedent setting for people in the future. I look at, from the many years I've been on this board, as each case is individual and should be met on its own merit. It's my own opinion. I personally do not think it's something that needs to be torn down. It's my own personal opinion. For me, I would support the variance and give you the chance to go get an SUP. Mistakes were made, and I get that. But for me personally, I believe that if there is an intent here to which it doesn't sound like, but again, I don't know what the real circumstances behind what you're saying, conflicting between the carport builder and yourself. But to me, to destroy something for being 18 inches off the property line, it is too big. Now, I don't remember what the city said about that, but it was still too big. I understand. And you have the consensus of your neighbors as a whole, except for one, that would favor with you on this motion. I, again, believe that this is one of those things that you're going to be put through a whole lot of hardships for a mistake that was made. It's pretty evident, as I can hear now, that we will not have a unanimous decision. I feel like, for me personally, that unfortunately it seems like it's a harsh thing for you to be going through, tear all that back down again, and try to rebuild that back. Again, these are only personal opinions. A mistake was made. A mistake can be rectified. I just think that in this particular case, it should be handled on its own merit and not try to be precedent setting. I've done enough of these cases already through the BOA to realize that there have been mitigating circumstances and there's room for error. This board is here to listen to those variables and impose the code as it is read without hardships that are entailed. So then otherwise it comes back to us to simply feel what we think is correct and under the right circumstances. So I unfortunately feel that you will be denied tonight, but it will not be at my hand. So I think that this board should make a collective motion to approve it and then give you a chance to get before the council and ask for an SUP. Because it may not get through there. I just think that under this, the priority being set is one that, certain pieces of mistakes should be looked at individually. So for that, I'm going to support you.
So I have a couple of questions for the applicant. You can kind of see the pattern here. I always try to look for the middle ground. I try not to keep things as black and white, positive or negative. Have you, and for the city as well, I'd like for you to consider this question. I looked at the structure. By the way, you're my neighbor. You're just down the street from where I live. So my heart is with you. I want to help you, but I'm trying to figure out how to comply with the spirit of the law, the rules that we all have to comply with. And I understand that you didn't do this out of malice or neglect. It was just something that was thrust upon you and you're having to deal with it. My question to you is, have you spoken with another contractor or builder to see if because the biggest issue seems to me is the setback. If we can get you to move the frame 18 inches back so that you've got your 3-foot clearance, and I don't mean to interject myself into your business, but I know enough about structural engineering and about contracting that maybe there's a way that we can find, that you can find, rather than just demolishing the structure completely, that part of it can be taken down, reconstructed and shifted. Now, I don't know if it's going to be enough to get you under that 500-foot threshold, but I don't think that part of it is as big of a sin per se as the setback. My question to you is, have you talked to any contractors about that?
Specifically, I haven't talked to a contractor, but I've talked to other carport companies, and a lot of them don't want to touch it because it would have to be taken down piece by piece and then reconstructed, which is, the structure is meant to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But to move it 18 inches to the west would require going over the fence on the west side of the property into my backyard. So let's say this is the driveway, I have an 8-foot fence on this side, on the west side of the driveway. I would have to, and just within about 2 weeks ago, in preparation of a possibility like this, I wanted to make sure where the power lines were. If you look on the property map, there's a pool in the backyard that I had put in when I first bought the property when I moved here in 2005 after the Marine Corps. And they had to move my pool plan from being closest to the alley to the middle of my yard, because according to the plans on the property when they built it, they were supposed to run the power line down the alley, down the driveway. Somebody cut corners and put that power line diagonally through that square. So I couldn't put the pool there unless I wanted to pay $10,000 to redo the power line. So I said to the pool guy, just flip it over so it's closer to the house, which is what it did. Now, to put a concrete footing down in my yard, to place that 35-foot runner for the west side of the carport, I would have to put a concrete footing down in my yard, which goes right over the power line. So I'm not sure how, I'm not a contractor, I'm not sure how that would actually happen, if the power line would have to be moved, or you can concrete around the power line. I'm not sure how that goes. But to move 18 inches west, the whole structure would obviously have to come down, and to reassemble it, you would have to, at least for the last two closest to the alley supports, would probably have to be crane, like a small crane to get it over the fence, back onto the support line. So there's a lot.
I understand it's a complicated thing. I'm just trying to, again, trying to find some middle ground to help you to see if there's any
I
way.
anticipated that possibility, but I wanted to confirm where the power line was. So I'm not sure how you can put a 35-foot long, 1-foot wide concrete footer down to place that on there, and how structurally sound that would be compared to the driveway where it sits right now.
Right, I understand. Thank you.
All right, any more questions for applicant? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Shen, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about when you were building this and no permit was pulled, tell us about what your conversation was with the contractor.
The carport company was in Clarksville, Texas, which is about an hour east of Paris. And I was talking to the lady who was selling the carports, and they called the company and gave them my situation. And they said, as long as it's not attached to your structure, you're not going to need a permit.
So they told you that. Did they tell you that in writing?
No, that was a verbal thing.
I mean, in any city, a permit's required for changing your hot water heater. I mean, you didn't think that you needed a permit to put this big thing over your RV storage, over your driveway? That's what I'm trying, I mean, I've said I would disapprove it, but I also want to understand fully how this came out. How did this happen?
As a layman, I just thought,
I'm a layman too.
There's no power, there's no water to it, there's no electricity to it, I knew that common sense of building with a door and 4 sides would need to be permitted. That's pretty much my understanding of construction. I didn't know that. When I had my shed put in the backyard to store lawn equipment and other stuff, it's probably, they constructed it a couple months after I bought the house and got there from after the Marine Corps. I'm guessing it's probably 10 by 14. I didn't need a permit for that. And the pool, obviously, that was major electrical work, water, plumbing, everything. And the pool contractor went through the permit process. And that's This was something that was, it's not really a permanent structure. That's where I was coming from mindset. It was more of just a protective structure and not going to be enclosed at all.
What about the concerns of your neighbor? Because I assume the person that's objected is your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Water runoff that they're concerned about? Talk to me about that.
The water runoff is...
Because that's one of the reasons why there is a setback, a specified setback in the city rules, is because if somebody puts a slab right up against the property line, you know, the water can run over into their property. I mean, did that
The
not?
concrete that came in on the grass there was designed for that. It actually, it's less water in your yard because it's sloped towards my driveway.
Is there a gutter all right, that's the roof like this, are there gutters that direct the water on the edge
The
away from your neighbor's
The
yard?
ridges are front to back, north to south.
Mhm.
So everything on the top of the structure itself runs from, either goes to my house and then down the driveway to the alley, or it ends up in the alley, on the alley side of the roof. The only runoff that she's going to get would be from her own property. And I had the same problem on the side yard of my property. I'd have standing water. And with the soil composition here in this part of Texas, it's hard not to have a standing pool in your yard, whether it's flat or not. The water runoff on the side of my house, on the east side of my house, has always sat there. It's been a sat between both properties. But that's actually helped that problem, because the water runoff that will run to my side yard from my property, from the driveway to the grass, will create a huge pool there. When there weren't two houses built there, that lot was empty because of its unique shape. There was two lots. On one, they split it into two and built two houses. And that whole lot would flood right by the alley every time it rained. It was just the way it was designed and graded initially. And when they put that two-story house, which is taller than my carport, on her south fence, she wasn't happy about that either. And
Well, I don't want to get into your neighbor. I'm talking about your application here.
my application,
Your application for a variance so you can keep your carport and not have to tear it down. I
Right.
don't want to, you know, my point with your neighbor was that was her concern, but I don't want to, you know, like get into.
the concrete is sloped towards my driveway, so the water that would have normally ended up in that grass area and sloped to the west is now all going to my driveway. I mean, it would have, the water would have went east before the concrete that's graded towards my driveway now directs all the water to the west. So even any runoff that comes off the carport closest to her fence goes into my driveway, doesn't go into her yard. So I guess the concrete guys did have that planned out to run the water into my driveway.
Thank you, sir. I have a question for staff. Staff, we're talking about if this were to be approved, it goes to council, it doesn't go to P&Z, it goes to council for a special use permit. Is that correct?
Planning and Zoning Commission first for recommendation.
So it goes through both then?
Yes.
All right. If it were denied, could the applicant go to planning and zoning with a request for a major warrant to keep it? Or does it have to be torn down if it's denied, period?
They cannot go for a major warrant. That is a form-based code process. The rules for this property are applicable to the Rowlett Development Code, straight zoning as we call it. So if it were denied, they would have to, if they want to retain it, figure out a way to then shift over as indicated by the applicant. And then,
But it's not just a matter of shifting over, it's also over 500 square feet.
absolutely, that's a separate caveat in itself.
So the two issues are the size of it and the location.
Primary concern is the setback.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Any other questions? This time, I would entertain a vote, or a motion.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance, and I'll tell you why I changed my mind, because I'm not gonna sit up here and, with a four-man thing and have you have to tear down this facility. I'll leave this in the best hands of the Planning and Zoning Commission, so I'd like to recommend that we approve this, and I will change my mind.
We have a motion from Mr. Mosman,
Second?
second from Mr. Schmidt. Any discussion? All in favor? And the motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck.
I'm sorry, I got another tattoo.
That's what you should do, Dale, seriously, on that.
One more thing. We are officially adjourned.